How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Delvin. Introduction. In the preparation of this little work, the writer has kept one end in view, viz., to make it serviceable for those for whom it is intended, that is, for those who have neither the time nor the opportunity, the learning nor the inclination, to peruse elaborate and abstruse treatises on rhetoric, grammar, and composition. To them, such works are as gold encased in chests of steel and locked beyond the power of opening. This book has no pretension about it whatever. It is neither a manual of rhetoric, expatiating on the dogmas of style, nor a grammar full of arbitrary rules and exceptions. It is merely an effort to help ordinary, everyday people to express themselves in ordinary, everyday language in a proper manner. Some broad rules are laid down, the observance of which will enable the reader to keep within the pale of propriety in oral and written language. Many idiomatic words and expressions peculiar to the language have been given, besides which, a number of the common mistakes and pitfalls have been placed before the reader, so that he may know and avoid them. The writer has to acknowledge his indebtedness to no one in particular, but to all in general who have ever written on the subject. The little book goes forth, a finger-post on the road of language, pointing in the right direction. It is hoped that they who go according to its index will arrive at the goal of correct speaking and writing. End of introduction.
How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 1. Requirements of Speech. Vocabulary, Parts of Speech, Requisites. It is very easy to learn how to speak and write correctly, as for all purposes of ordinary conversation and communication, only about 2,000 different words are required. The mastery of just 2,000 words, the knowing where to place them, will make us not masters of the English language, but masters of correct speaking and writing. Small number, you will say, compared with what is in the dictionary. But nobody ever uses all the words in the dictionary, or could use them, did he live to be the age of Methuselah, and there is no necessity for using them. There are upwards of 200,000 words in the recent editions of the large dictionaries, but the 100th part of this number will suffice for all your wants. Of course you may think not, and you may not be content to call things by their common names. You may be ambitious to show superiority over others, and display your learning, or rather your pedantry and lack of learning. For instance, you may not want to call a spade a spade. You may prefer to call it a spatulous device for abrading the surface of the soil. Better, however, to stick to the old, familiar, simple name that your grandfather called it. It has stood the test of time, and old friends are always good friends. To use a big word or a foreign word when a small one and a familiar one will answer the same purpose is a sign of ignorance. Great scholars and writers and polite speakers use simple words. To go back to the number necessary for all purposes of conversation, correspondence, and writing, 2,000, we find that a great many people who pass in society as being polished, refined, and educated use less, for they know less. The greatest scholar alive hasn't more than 4,000 different words at his command, and he never has occasion to use half the number. In the works of Shakespeare, the most wonderful genius the world has ever known, there is the enormous number of 15,000 different words, but almost 10,000 of them are obsolete or meaningless today. Every person of intelligence should be able to use his mother tongue correctly. It only requires a little pains, a little care, a little study to enable one to do so, and the recompense is great. Consider the contrast between the well-bred, polite man, who knows how to choose and use his words correctly, and the underbred, vulgar boor whose language grates upon the ear and jars the sensitiveness of the finer feelings. The blunders of the latter, his infringement of all the canons of grammar, his absurdities and monstrosities of language, make his very presence a pain, and one is glad to escape from his company. The proper grammatical formation of the English language, so that one may acquit oneself as a correct conversationalist in the best society, or be able to write and express his thoughts and ideas upon paper in the right manner, may be acquired in a few lessons. It is the purpose of this book, as briefly and concisely as possible, to direct the reader along a straight course, pointing out the mistakes he must avoid, and giving him such assistance as will enable him to reach the goal of a correct knowledge of the English language. It is not a grammar in any sense, but a guide, a silent signal post pointing the way in the right direction. The English language in a nutshell. All the words in the English language are divided into 9 great classes. These classes are called the parts of speech. They are article, noun, adjective, pronoun, verb, adverb, preposition, conjunction, and interjection. Of these, the noun is the most important, as all the others are more or less dependent upon it. A noun signifies the name of any person, place, or thing, in fact anything of which we can have either thought or idea. There are 2 kinds of nouns, proper and common. Common nouns are names which belong in common to a race or class, such as man or city. Proper nouns distinguish individual members of a race or class, such as John, Philadelphia. In the former case, man is a name which belongs in common to the whole race of mankind, and city is also a name which is common to all large centres of population. But John signifies a particular individual of the race, while Philadelphia denotes a particular one from among the cities of the world. Nouns are varied by person, number, gender, and case. Person is that relation existing between the speaker, those addressed, and the subject under consideration, whether by discourse or correspondence. The persons are first, second, and third, and they represent respectively the speaker, the person addressed, and the person or thing mentioned or under consideration. Number is the distinction of one from more than one. There are 2 numbers, singular and plural. The singular denotes one, the plural 2 or more. The plural is generally formed from the singular by the addition of s or es. Gender has the same relation to nouns that sex has to individuals, but while there are only 2 sexes, there are 4 genders, viz., masculine, feminine, neuter, and common. The masculine gender denotes all those of the male kind, the feminine gender all those of the female kind. The neuter gender denotes inanimate things, or whatever is without life, and common gender is applied to animate things, the sex of which for the time being is indeterminable, such as fish, mouse, bird, etc. Sometimes things which are without life as we conceive it, and which, properly speaking, belong to the neuter gender, are, by a figure of speech called personification, changed into either the masculine or feminine gender, as for instance we say of the sun, he is rising, of the moon, she is setting. Case is the relation one noun bears to another, or to a verb, or to a preposition. There are three cases: the nominative, the possessive, and the objective. The nominative is the subject of which we are speaking, or the agent which directs the action of the verb. The possessive case denotes possession, while the objective indicates the person or thing which is affected by the action of the verb. An article is a word placed before a noun to show whether the latter is used in a particular or general sense. There are but two articles, a or an, and the. An adjective is a word which qualifies a noun, that is, which shows some distinguishing mark or characteristic belonging to the noun. Definitions. A pronoun is a word used for or instead of a noun to keep us from repeating the same noun too often. Pronouns, like nouns, have case, number, gender, and person. There are three kinds of pronouns: personal, relative, and adjective. A verb is a word which signifies action, or the doing of something. A verb is inflected by tense and mood, and by number and person, though the latter two belong strictly to the subject of the verb. An adverb is a word which modifies a verb, an adjective, and sometimes another adverb. A preposition serves to connect words and to show the relation between the objects which the words express. A conjunction is a word which joins words, phrases, clauses, and sentences together. An interjection is a word which expresses surprise or some sudden emotion of the mind. Three essentials. The three essentials of the English language are purity, perspicuity, and precision. By purity is signified the use of good English. It precludes the use of all slang words, vulgar phrases, obsolete terms, foreign idioms, ambiguous expressions, or any ungrammatical language whatsoever. Neither does it sanction the use of any newly coined word until such word is adopted by the best writers and speakers. Perspicuity demands the clearest expression of thought conveyed in unequivocal language, so that there may be no misunderstanding whatever of the thought or idea the speaker or writer wishes to convey. All ambiguous words, words of double meaning, and words that might possibly be construed in a sense different from that intended, are strictly forbidden. Perspicuity requires a style at once clear and comprehensive, and entirely free from pomp and pedantry and affectation, or any straining after effect. Precision requires concise and exact expression, free from redundancy and tautology, a style terse and clear, and simple enough to enable the hearer or reader to comprehend immediately the meaning of the speaker or writer. It forbids, on the one hand, all long and involved sentences, and on the other, those that are too short and abrupt. Its object is to strike the golden mean in such a way as to rivet the attention of the hearer or reader on the words uttered or written. End of chapter 1.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Opheliad in New South Wales, Australia, November 2006. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 2. Essentials of English Grammar. Divisions of grammar, definitions, etymology. In order to speak and write the English language correctly, it is imperative that the fundamental principles of the grammar be mastered, for no matter how much we may read of the best authors, no matter how much we may associate with and imitate the best speakers, if we do not know the underlying principles of the correct formation of sentences and the relation of words to one another, we will be to a great extent like the parrot, that merely repeats what it hears without understanding the import of what is said. Of course, the parrot, being a creature without reason, cannot comprehend. It can simply repeat what is said to it, and as it utters phrases and sentences of profanity with as much facility as those of virtue, so, by like analogy, when we do not understand the grammar of the language, we may be making egregious blunders while thinking we are speaking with the utmost accuracy. Divisions of grammar. There are 4 great divisions of grammar, viz. Orthography, etymology, syntax, and prosody. Orthography treats of letters and the mode of combining them into words. Etymology treats of the various classes of words and the changes they undergo. Syntax treats of the connection and arrangements of words in sentences. Prosody treats of the manner of speaking and reading and the different kinds of verse. The 3 first mentioned concern us most. Letters. A letter is a mark or character used to represent an articulate sound. Letters are divided into vowels and consonants. A vowel is a letter which makes a distinct sound by itself. Consonants cannot be sounded without the aid of vowels. The vowels are A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes W and Y when they do not begin a word or syllable. Syllables and words. A syllable is a distinct sound produced by a single effort of transcriber's note, 1 to 2 words illegible, shall, pig, dog. In every syllable there must be at least 1 vowel. A word consists of 1 syllable or a combination of syllables. Many rules are given for the dividing of words into syllables, but the best is to follow as closely as possible the divisions made by the organs of speech in properly pronouncing them. The parts of speech. Article. An article is a word placed before a noun to show whether the noun is used in a particular or general sense. There are 2 articles, a or an and the. A or an is called the indefinite article because it does not point to any particular person or thing but indicates the noun in its widest sense. Thus, a man means any man whatsoever of the species or race. The is called the definite article because it points out some particular person or thing. Thus, the man means some particular individual. Noun. A noun is the name of any person, place, or thing, as John, London, book. Nouns are proper and common. Proper nouns are names applied to particular persons or places. Common nouns are names applied to a whole kind or species. Nouns are inflected by number, gender, and case. Number is that inflection of the noun by which we indicate whether it represents 1 or more than 1. Gender is that inflection by which we signify whether the noun is the name of a male, a female, of an inanimate object, or something which has no distinction of sex. Case is that inflection of the noun which denotes the state of the person, place, or thing represented, as the subject of an affirmation or question, the owner or possessor of something mentioned, or the object of an action or of a relation. Thus, in the example, John tore the leaves of Sarah's book, the distinction between book, which represents only 1 object, and leaves, which represents 2 or more objects of the same kind, is called number. The distinction of sex between John, a male, and Sarah, a female, and book and leaves, things which are inanimate and neither male nor female, is called gender. And the distinction of state between John, the person who tore the book, and the subject of the affirmation, Mary, the owner of the book, leaves, the objects torn, and book, the object related to leaves, as the whole of which they were a part, is called case. Adjective. An adjective is a word which qualifies a noun, that is, shows or points out some distinguishing mark or feature of the noun, as a black dog. Adjectives have three forms called degrees of comparison: the positive, the comparative, and the superlative. The positive is the simple form of the adjective without expressing increase or diminution of the original quality: nice. The comparative is that form of the adjective which expresses increase or diminution of the quality: nicer. The superlative is that form which expresses the greatest increase or diminution of the quality: nicest. Or, an adjective is in the positive form when it does not express comparison, as a rich man. An adjective is in the comparative form when it expresses comparison between two or between one and a number taken collectively, as John is richer than James. He is richer than all the men in Boston. An adjective is in the superlative form when it expresses a comparison between one and a number of individuals taken separately, as John is the richest man in Boston. Adjectives expressive of properties or circumstances which cannot be increased have only the positive form, as a circular road, the chief end, an extreme measure. Adjectives are compared in two ways, either by adding to the positive to form the comparative, and est to the positive to form the superlative, or by prefixing more to the positive for the comparative, and most to the positive for the superlative, as handsome, handsomer, handsomest, or handsome, more handsome, most handsome. Adjectives of two or more syllables are generally compared by prefixing more and most. Many adjectives are irregular in comparison, as bad, worse, worst, good, better, best. Pronoun. A pronoun is a word used in place of a noun, as John gave his pen to James, and he lent it to Jane to write her copy with it. Without the pronouns we would have had to write this sentence: John gave John's pen to James, and James lent the pen to Jane to write Jane's copy with the pen. There are three kinds of pronouns: personal, relative, and adjective pronouns. Personal. Pronouns are so called because they are used instead of the names of persons, places, and things. The personal pronouns are I, thou, he, she, and it, with their plurals we, ye or you, and they. I is the pronoun of the first person because it represents the person speaking. Thou is the pronoun of the second person because it represents the person spoken to. He, she, it are the pronouns of the third person because they represent the persons or things of whom we are speaking. Like nouns, the personal pronouns have number, gender, and case. The gender of the first and second person is obvious, as they represent the person or persons speaking and those who are addressed. The personal pronouns are thus declined: first person, masculine or feminine; n singular, I; n plural, we; p singular, mine; p plural, ours; o singular, me; o plural, us. Second person, masculine or feminine: n singular, thou; n plural, you; p singular, thine; p plural, yours; o singular, thee; o plural, you. Third person, masculine: n singular, he; n plural, they; p singular, his; P plural, theirs. O singular, him. O plural, them. Third person feminine. N singular, she. N plural, they. P singular, hers. P plural, theirs. O singular, her. O plural, them. Third person neuter. N singular, it. N plural, they. P singular, its. P plural, theirs. O singular, it. O plural, them. N.B. In colloquial language and ordinary writing, thou, thine, and thee are seldom used, except by the society of friends. The plural form you is used for both the nominative and objective singular in the second person, and yours is generally used in the possessive in place of thine. The relative pronouns are so called because they relate to some word or phrase going before, as the boy who told the truth. He has done well, which gives me great pleasure. Here, who and which are not only used in place of other words, but who refers immediately to boy, and which to the circumstance of his having done well. The word or clause to which a relative pronoun refers is called the antecedent. The relative pronouns are who, which, that, and what. Who is applied to persons only, as the man who was here. Which is applied to the lower animals and things without life, as the horse which I sold, the hat which I bought. That is applied to both persons and things, as the friend that helps, the bird that sings, the knife that cuts. What is a compound relative, including both the antecedent and the relative, and is equivalent to that which, as I did what he desired, i.e., I did that which he desired. Relative pronouns have the singular and plural alike. Who is either masculine or feminine. Which and that are masculine, feminine, or neuter. What, as a relative pronoun, is always neuter. That and what are not inflected. Who and which are thus declined. Singular and plural. N, who. N, which. P, whose. P, whose. O, whom. O, which. Who, which, and what, when used to ask questions, are called interrogative pronouns. Adjective. Pronouns partake of the nature of adjectives and pronouns and are subdivided as follows. Demonstrative adjective pronouns, which directly point out the person or object. They are this, that, with their plurals, these, those, and yon, same and self-same. Distributive adjective pronouns used distributively. They are each, every, either, neither. Indefinite adjective pronouns used more or less indefinitely. They are any, all, few, some, several, one, other, another, none. Possessive adjective pronouns denoting possession. They are my, thy, his, her, its, our, your, their. N.B. The possessive adjective pronouns differ from the possessive case of the personal pronouns in that the latter can stand alone, while the former cannot. Who owns that book? It is mine. You cannot say, it is my. The word book must be repeated. The verb. A verb is a word which implies action or the doing of something, or it may be defined as a word which affirms, commands, or asks a question. Thus the words John the table contain no assertion, but when the word strikes is introduced, something is affirmed. Hence the word strikes is a verb and gives completeness and meaning to the group. The simple form of the verb without inflection is called the root of the verb. e.g., love is the root of the verb to love. Verbs are regular or irregular, transitive or intransitive. A verb is said to be regular when it forms the past tense by adding ed to the present, or d if the verb ends in e. When its past tense does not end in ed, it is said to be irregular. A transitive verb is one the action of which passes over to or affects some object, as I struck the table. Here the action of striking affected the object, table, hence struck is a transitive verb. An intransitive verb is one in which the action remains with the subject, as I walk, I sit, I run. Many intransitive verbs, however, can be used transitively. Thus, I walk the horse. Walk is here transitive. Verbs are inflected by number, person, tense, and mood. Number and person as applied to the verb really belong to the subject. They are used with the verb to denote whether the assertion is made regarding one or more than one, and whether it is made in reference to the person speaking, the person spoken to, or the person or thing spoken about. Tense. In their tenses, verbs follow the divisions of time. They have present tense, past tense, and future tense, with their variations to express the exact time of action as to an event happening, having happened, or yet to happen. Mood. There are 4 simple moods: the infinitive, the indicative, the imperative, and the subjunctive. The mood of a verb denotes the mode or manner in which it is used. Thus, if it is used in its widest sense without reference to person or number, time or place, it is in the infinitive mood, as to run. Here we are not told who does the running, when it is done, where it is done, or anything about it. When a verb is used to indicate or declare or ask a simple question, or make any direct statement, it is in the indicative mood. The boy loves his book. Here a direct statement is made concerning the boy. Have you a pin? Here a simple question is asked, which calls for an answer. When the verb is used to express a command or entreaty, it is in the imperative mood, as go away, give me a penny. When the verb is used to express doubt, supposition, or uncertainty, or when some future action depends upon a contingency, it is in the subjunctive mood, as if I come, he shall remain. Many grammarians include a 5th mood called the potential to express power, possibility, liberty, necessity, will, or duty. It is formed by means of the auxiliaries may, can, ought, and must, but in all cases it can be resolved into the indicative or subjunctive. Thus in I may write if I choose, may write is by some classified as in the potential mood, but in reality the phrase I may write is an indicative one, while the second clause, if I choose, is the expression of a condition upon which not my liberty to write depends, but my actual writing. Verbs have 2 participles, the present or imperfect, sometimes called the active ending in ing, and the past or perfect, often called the passive, ending in ed or d. The infinitive expresses the sense of the verb in a substantive form, the participles in an adjective form, as to rise early is healthful, an early rising man, the newly risen sun. The participle in ing is frequently used as a substantive and consequently is equivalent to an infinitive. Thus, to rise early is healthful and rising early is healthful are the same. The principal parts of a verb are the present indicative, past indicative, and past participle, as love, loved, loved. Sometimes one or more of these parts are wanting, and then the verb is said to be defective. Present, can, past, could, passive participle, wanting. Present, may, past, might, passive participle, wanting. Present, shall, past, should, passive participle, wanting. Present, will, past, would, passive participle, wanting. Present, ought, past, ought, passive participle wanting. Verbs may also be divided into principal and auxiliary. A principal verb is that without which a sentence or clause can contain no assertion or affirmation. An auxiliary is a verb joined to the root or participles of a principal verb to express time and manner with greater precision than can be done by the tenses and moods in their simple form. Thus the sentence, "I am writing an exercise. When I shall have finished it, I shall read it to the class," has no meaning without the principal verbs writing, finished, read, but the meaning is rendered more definite, especially with regard to time, by the auxiliary verbs am, have, shall. There are 9 auxiliary or helping verbs, viz. be, have, do, shall, will, may, can, ought, and must. They are called helping verbs because it is by their aid the compound tenses are formed. To be. The verb to be is the most important of the auxiliary verbs. It has 11 parts, viz. am, art, is, are, was, wast, were, wert, be, being, and been. Voice. The active voice is that form of the verb which shows the subject not being acted upon but acting, as the cat catches mice. Charity covers a multitude of sins. The passive voice. When the action signified by a transitive verb is thrown back upon the agent, that is to say, when the subject of the verb denotes the recipient of the action, the verb is said to be in the passive voice. John was loved by his neighbours. Here John, the subject, is also the object affected by the loving. The action of the verb is thrown back on him, hence the compound verb, was loved, is said to be in the passive voice. The passive voice is formed by putting the perfect participle of any transitive verb with any of the 11 parts of the verb to be. Conjugation. The conjugation of a verb is its orderly arrangement in voices, moods, tenses, persons, and numbers. Here is the complete conjugation of the verb love, active voice. Principal parts. Present, love. Past, loved. Past participle, loved. Infinitive mood, to love. Indicative mood, present tense. Singular first person, I love. Plural first person, we love. Singular second person, you love. Plural second person, you love. Singular third person, he loves. Plural third person, they love. Past tense. Singular first person, I loved. Plural first person, we loved. Singular second person, you loved. Plural second person, you loved. Singular third person, he loved. Plural third person, they loved. Future tense. Singular first person, I shall love. Plural first person, they will love. Singular second person, you will love. Plural second person, you will love. Singular third person, he will love. Plural third person, we shall love. Transcriber's note: first person plural and third person plural reversed in original. Present perfect tense. First person singular, I have loved. First person plural, we have loved. Second person singular, you have loved. Second person plural, you have loved. Third person singular, he has loved. Third person plural, they have loved. Past perfect tense. First person singular, I had loved. First person plural, we had loved. Second person singular, you had loved. Second person plural, you had loved. Third person singular, he had loved. Third person plural, they had loved. Future perfect tense. First person singular, I shall have loved. First person plural, we shall have loved. Second person singular, you will have loved. second person plural, you will have loved. Third person singular, he will have loved. Third person plural, they will have loved. Imperative mood, present tense only. Second person singular, love, you. Second person plural, love, you. Subjunctive mood, present tense. First person singular, if I love. First person plural, if we love. Second person singular, if you love. Second person plural, if you love. Third person singular, if he love. Third person plural, if they love. Past tense. First person singular, if I loved. First person plural, if we loved. Second person singular, if you loved. Second person plural, if you loved. Third person singular, if he loved. Third person plural, if they loved. Present perfect tense. First person singular, if I have loved. First person plural, if we have loved. Second person singular, if you have loved. Second person plural, if you have loved. Third person singular, if he has loved. Third person plural, if they have loved. Past perfect tense. First person singular, if I had loved. First person plural, if we had loved. Second person singular, if you had loved. Second person plural, if you had loved. Third person singular, if he had loved. Third person plural, if they had loved. Infinitives. Present, to love. Perfect, to have loved. Participles. Present, loving. Past, loved. Perfect, having loved. Conjugation of to love. Passive voice. Indicative mood. Present tense. First person singular, I am loved. First person plural, we are loved. Second person singular, you are loved. Second person plural, you are loved. Third person singular, he is loved. Third person plural, they are loved. Past tense. First person singular, I was loved. First person plural, we were loved. Second person singular, you were loved. Second person plural, you were loved. Third person singular, he was loved. Third person plural, they were loved. Future tense. First person singular, I shall be loved. First person plural, we shall be loved. Second person singular, you will be loved. Second person plural, you will be loved. Third person singular, he will be loved. Third person plural, they will be loved. Present perfect tense. First person singular, I have been loved. First person plural, we have been loved. Second person singular, you have been loved. Second person plural, you have been loved. Third person singular, he has been loved. Third person plural, they have been loved. Past perfect tense. First person singular, I had been loved. First person plural, we had been loved. Second person singular, you had been loved. Second person plural, you had been loved. Third person singular, he had been loved. Third person plural, they had been loved. Future perfect tense. First person singular, I shall have been loved. First person plural, we shall have been loved. Second person singular, you will have been loved. Second person plural, you will have been loved. Third person singular, he will have been loved. Third person plural, they will have been loved. Imperative mood, present tense only. Second person singular, be, you, loved. Second person plural, be, you, loved. Subjunctive mood, present tense. First person singular, if I be loved. First person plural, if we be loved. Second person singular, if you be loved. Second person plural, if you be loved. Third person singular, if he be loved. Third person plural, if they be loved. Past tense. First person singular, if I were loved. First person plural, if they were loved. Second person singular, if you were loved. Second person plural, if you were loved. Third person singular, if he were loved. Third person plural, if we were loved. Present perfect tense. First person singular, if I have been loved. First person plural, if we have been loved. Second person singular, if you have been loved. Second person plural, if you have been loved. Third person singular, if he has been loved. Third person plural, if they have been loved. Past perfect tense. First person singular, if I had been loved. First person plural, if we had been loved. Second person singular, if you had been loved. Second person plural, if you had been loved. Third person singular, if he had been loved. Third person plural, if they had been loved. Infinitives. Present, to be loved. Perfect, to have been loved. Participles. Present, being loved. Past, been loved. Perfect, having been loved. NB. Note that the plural form of the personal pronoun you is used in the second person singular throughout. The old form thou, except in the conjugation of the verb to be, may be said to be obsolete. In the third person singular he is representative of the three personal pronouns of the third person, he, she, and it. Adverb. An adverb is a word which modifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. Thus, in the example, he writes well, the adverb shows the manner in which the writing is performed. In the examples, he is remarkably diligent and he works very faithfully, the adverbs modify the adjective diligent and the other adverb faithfully by expressing the degree of diligence and faithfulness. Adverbs are chiefly used to express in one word what would otherwise require two or more words. Thus, there signifies in that place. Whence, from what place. Usefully, in a useful manner. Adverbs, like adjectives, are sometimes varied in their terminations to express comparison and different degrees of quality. Some adverbs form the comparative and superlative by adding er and est, as soon, sooner, soonest. Adverbs which end in ly are compared by prefixing more and most, as nobly, more nobly, most nobly. A few adverbs are irregular in the formation of the comparative and superlative, as well, better, best. Preposition. A preposition connects words, clauses, and sentences together and shows the relation between them. My hand is on the table shows relation between hand and table. Prepositions are so called because they are generally placed before the word whose connection or relation with other words they point out. Conjunction. A conjunction joins words, clauses, and sentences, as John and James. My father and mother have come, but I have not seen them. The conjunctions in most general use are and, also, either, or, neither, nor, though, yet, but, however, for, that, because, since, therefore, wherefore, then, if, unless, lest. Interjection. An interjection is a word used to express some sudden emotion of the mind. Thus in the examples, "Ah, there he comes! Alas, what shall I do?" "Ah" expresses surprise and "alas," distress. Nouns, adjectives, verbs, and adverbs become interjections when they are uttered as exclamations, as nonsense, strange, hail, away, etc. We have now enumerated the parts of speech and as briefly as possible stated the functions of each. As they all belong to the same family, they are related to one another, but some are in closer affinity than others. To point out the exact relationship and the dependency of one word on another is called parsing. And in order that every etymological connection may be distinctly understood, a brief resume of the foregoing essentials is here given. The signification of the noun is limited to one, but to any one of the kind by the indefinite article, and to some particular one or some particular number by the definite article. Nouns in one form represent one of a kind, and in another any number, more than one. They are the names of males or females, or of objects which are neither male nor female, and they represent the subject of an affirmation, a command or a question, the owner or possessor of a thing, or the object of an action or of a relation expressed by a preposition. Adjectives express the qualities which distinguish one person or thing from another. In one form they express quality without comparison. In another they express comparison between two or between one and a number taken collectively. And in a third they express comparison between one and a number of others taken separately. Pronouns are used in place of nouns. One class of them is used merely as the substitutes of names. The pronouns of another class have a peculiar reference to some preceding words in the sentence of which they are the substitutes. And those of a third class refer adjectively to the persons or things they represent. Some pronouns are used for both the name and the substitute, and several are frequently employed in asking questions. Affirmations and commands are expressed by the verb, and different inflections of the verb express number, person, time, and manner. With regard to time, an affirmation may be present or past or future. With regard to manner, an affirmation may be positive or conditional, it being doubtful whether the condition is fulfilled or not, or it being implied that it is not fulfilled. The verb may express command or entreaty, or the sense of the verb may be expressed without affirming or commanding. The verb also expresses that an action or state is or was going on, by a form which is also used sometimes as a noun, and sometimes to qualify nouns. Affirmations are modified by adverbs, some of which can be inflected to express different degrees of modification. Words are joined together by conjunctions, and the various relations which one thing bears to another are expressed by prepositions. Sudden emotions of the mind and exclamations are expressed by interjections. Some words, according to meaning, belong sometimes to one part of speech, sometimes to another. Thus, in "After a storm comes a calm," calm is a noun. In "It is a calm evening," calm is an adjective, and in "Calm your fears," calm is a verb. The following sentence, containing all the parts of speech, is passed etymologically. I now see the old man coming, but alas, he has walked with much difficulty. I, a personal pronoun, first person singular, masculine or feminine gender, nominative case, subject of the verb see. Now, an adverb of time modifying the verb see. See, an irregular transitive verb, indicative mood, present tense, first person singular to agree with its nominative or subject I. The definite article particularizing the noun man. Old, an adjective positive degree qualifying the noun man. Man, a common noun, third person singular, masculine gender, objective case governed by the transitive verb see. Coming, the present or imperfect participle of the verb to come, referring to the noun man. But, a conjunction. Alas, an interjection expressing pity or sorrow. He, a personal pronoun, third person singular, masculine gender, nominative case, subject of verb has walked. Has walked, a regular intransitive verb, indicative mood, perfect tense, third person singular to agree with its nominative or subject he. With, a preposition governing the noun difficulty. Much, an adjective, positive degree, qualifying the noun difficulty. Difficulty, a common noun, third person singular, neuter gender, Objective case governed by the preposition with. NB. Much is generally an adverb. As an adverb, it is thus compared: positive, much; comparative, more; superlative, most. End of chapter 2.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 3. The Sentence. Different kinds, arrangement of words, and paragraph. A sentence is an assemblage of words so arranged as to convey a determinate sense or meaning, in other words, to express a complete thought or idea. No matter how short, it must contain one finite verb and a subject or agent to direct the action of the verb. Birds fly, fish swim, men walk are sentences. A sentence always contains two parts: something spoken about and something said about it. The word or words indicating what is spoken about form what is called the subject, and the word or words indicating what is said about it form what is called the predicate. In the sentences given above, birds, fish, and men are the subjects, while fly, swim, and walk are the predicates. There are three kinds of sentences: simple, compound, and complex. The simple sentence expresses a single thought and consists of one subject and one predicate, as "Man is mortal." A compound sentence consists of two or more simple sentences of equal importance, the parts of which are either expressed or understood, as "The men work in the fields and the women work in the household," or "The men work in the fields and the women in the household," or "The men and women work in the fields and in the household." A complex sentence consists of two or more simple sentences so combined that one depends on the other to complete its meaning, as "When he returns, I shall go on my vacation." Here the words "when he returns" are dependent on the rest of the sentence for their meaning. A clause is a separate part of a complex sentence, as "when he returns" in the last example. A phrase consists of two or more words without a finite verb. Without a finite verb we cannot affirm anything or convey an idea, therefore we can have no sentence. Infinitives and participles, which are the infinite parts of the verb, cannot be predicates. "I looking up the street" is not a sentence, for it is not a complete action expressed. When we hear such an expression as "a dog running along the street," we wait for something more to be added, something more affirmed about the dog, whether he bit or barked or fell dead or was run over. Thus in every sentence there must be a finite verb to limit the subject. When the verb is transitive, that is, when the action cannot happen without affecting something, the thing affected is called the object. Thus in "Cain killed Abel," the action of the killing affected Abel. In "The cat has caught a mouse," mouse is the object of the catching. Arrangement of words in a sentence. Of course, in simple sentences the natural order of arrangement is subject, verb, object. In many cases no other form is possible. Thus in the sentence "The cat has caught a mouse," We cannot reverse it and say, "The mouse has caught a cat," without destroying the meaning, and in any other form of arrangement, such as "a mouse the cat has caught," we feel that while it is intelligible, it is a poor way of expressing the fact, and one which jars upon us more or less. In longer sentences, however, when there are more words than what are barely necessary for subject, verb, and object, we have greater freedom of arrangement, and can so place the words as to give the best effect. The proper placing of words depends upon perspicuity and precision. These two combined give style to the structure. Most people are familiar with Gray's line in the immortal elegy, "The ploughman homeward plods his weary way." This line can be paraphrased to read 18 different ways. Here are a few variations. Homeward the ploughman plods his weary way. The ploughman plods his weary way homeward. Plods homeward the ploughman his weary way. His weary way the ploughman homeward plods. Homeward his weary way plods the ploughman. Plods the ploughman his weary way homeward. His weary way the ploughman plods homeward. His weary way homeward the ploughman plods. The ploughman plods homeward his weary way. The ploughman his weary way plods homeward. And so on. It is doubtful if any of the other forms are superior to the one used by the poet. Of course, his arrangement was made to comply with the rhythm and rhyme of his verse. Most of the variations depend upon the emphasis we wish to place upon the different words. In arranging the words in an ordinary sentence, we should not lose sight of the fact that the beginning and end are the important places for catching the attention of the reader. Words in these places have greater emphasis than elsewhere. In Gray's line, the general meaning conveyed is that a weary ploughman is plodding his way homeward, but according to the arrangement, a very slight difference is effected in the idea. Some of the variations make us think more of the ploughman, others more of the plodding, and still others more of the weariness. As the beginning and end of a sentence are the most important places, it naturally follows that small or insignificant words should be kept from those positions. Of the two places, the end one is the more important. Therefore it really calls for the most important word in the sentence. Never commence a sentence with and, but, since, because, and other similar weak words, and never end it with prepositions, small weak adverbs or pronouns. The parts of a sentence which are most closely connected with one another in meaning should be closely connected in order also. By ignoring this principle, many sentences are made, if not nonsensical, really ridiculous and ludicrous. For instance, $10 reward is offered for information of any person injuring this property by order of the owner. This monument was erected to the memory of John Jones, who was shot by his affectionate brother. In the construction of all sentences, the grammatical rules must be inviolably observed. The laws of concord, that is, the agreement of certain words, must be obeyed. The verb agrees with its subject in person and number. I have, thou hast. The pronoun thou is here used to illustrate the verb form, though it is almost obsolete. He has. These show the variation of the verb to agree with the subject. A singular subject calls for a singular verb. A plural subject demands a verb in the plural, as the boy writes, the boys write. The agreement of a verb and its subject is often destroyed by confusing collective and common nouns. A collective noun is a number of individuals or things regarded as a whole, as class regiment, When the individuals or things are prominently brought forward, use a plural verb, as the class were distinguished for ability. When the idea of the whole as a unit is under consideration, employ a singular verb, as the regiment was in camp. Foreign and English nouns. It is sometimes hard for the ordinary individual to distinguish the plural from the singular in foreign nouns, therefore he should be careful in the selection of the verb. He should look up the word and be guided accordingly. He was an alumnus of Harvard. They were alumni of Harvard. Compound and simple subjects. When a sentence with one verb has two or more subjects denoting different things connected by and, the verb should be plural, as snow and rain are disagreeable. When the subjects denote the same thing and are connected by or, the verb should be singular, as the man or the woman is to blame. And real and apparent subjects. When the same verb has more than one subject of different persons or numbers, it agrees with the most prominent in thought, as he and not you is wrong. Whether he or I am to be blamed. Never use the past participle for the past tense, nor vice versa. This mistake is a very common one. At every turn we hear, he done it, for he did it. The jar was broke, instead of broken. He would have went, for he would have gone, etc. The use of the verbs shall and will is a rock upon which even the best speakers come to wreck. They are interchanged recklessly. Their significance changes according as they are used with the first, second, or third person. With the first person, shall is used in direct statement to express a simple future action, as I shall go to the city tomorrow. With the second and third persons, shall is used to express a determination, as you shall go to the city tomorrow. He shall go to the city tomorrow. With the first person, will is used in direct statement to express determination, as I will go to the city tomorrow. With the second and third persons, will is used to express simple future action, as you will go to the city tomorrow. He will go to the city tomorrow. A very old rule regarding the uses of shall and will is thus expressed in rhyme. In the first person simply shall foretells, in will a threat or else a promise dwells. Shall in the second and third does threat, will simply then foretells the future feat. Take special care to distinguish between the nominative and objective case. The pronouns are the only words which retain the ancient distinctive case ending for the objective. Remember that the objective case follows transitive verbs and prepositions. Don't say, the boy who I sent to see you, but the boy whom I sent to see you. Whom is here the object of the transitive verb sent. Don't say, she bowed to him and I, but she bowed to him and me, since me is the objective case following the preposition to, understood. Between you and I is a very common expression. It should be between you and me, since between is a preposition calling for the objective case. Be careful in the use of the relative pronouns who, which, and that. Who refers only to persons, which only to things, as the boy who was drowned, the umbrella which I lost. The relative that may refer to both persons and things, as the man that I saw, the hat that I bought. Don't use the superlative degree of the adjective for the comparative, as he is the richest of the two, for he is the richer of the two. Other mistakes often made in this connection are using the double comparative and superlative, as "These apples are much more preferable." The most universal motive to business is gain. Comparing objects which belong to dissimilar classes, as "There is no nicer life than a teacher." Including objects in classes to which they do not belong, as "The fairest of her daughters, Eve." Excluding an object from a class to which it does belong, as "Caesar was braver than any ancient warrior." Don't use an adjective for an adverb, or an adverb for an adjective. Don't say, "He acted nice towards me," but "He acted nicely toward me." And instead of saying, "She looked beautifully," say, "She looked beautiful." Place the adverb as near as possible to the word it modifies. Instead of saying, "He walked to the door quickly," say, "He walked quickly to the door." Not alone be careful to distinguish between the nominative and objective cases of the pronouns, but try to avoid ambiguity in their use. The amusing effect of disregarding the reference of pronouns is well illustrated by Burton in the following story of Billy Williams, a comic actor who thus narrates his experience in riding a horse owned by Hamblin, the manager. "So down I goes to the stable with Tom Flynn, and told the man to put the saddle on him." "On Tom Flynn?" "No, on the horse. So after talking with Tom Flynn a while, I mounted him." "What? Mounted Tom Flynn?" "No, the horse. And then I shook hands with him and rode off." "Shook hands with a horse, Billy?" "No, with Tom Flynn. And then I rode off up the Bowery, and who should I meet but Tom Hamblin. So I got off and told the boy to hold him by the head." "What? Hold Hamblin by the head?" "No, the horse. And then we went and had a drink together." "What? You and the horse?" "No, me and Hamblin. And after that I mounted him again and went out of town." "What? Mounted Hamblin again?" "No, the horse. And when I got to Burnham, who should be there but Tom Flynn. He'd taken another horse and rode out ahead of me, so I told the hostler to tie him up." "Tie Tom Flynn up?" "No, the horse. And we had a drink there." "What? You and the horse?" "No, me and Tom Flynn." Finding his auditors by this time in a hoarse laugh, Billy wound up with, "Now, look here, every time I say horse, you say Hamblin, and every time I say Hamblin, you say horse. I'll be hanged if I tell you any more about it." Sentence classification. There are two great classes of sentences, according to the general principles upon which they are founded. These are termed the loose and the periodic. In the loose sentence, the main idea is put first, and then follow several facts in connection with it. Defoe is an author particularly noted for this kind of sentence. He starts out with a leading declaration, to which he adds several attendant connections. For instance, in the opening of the story of Robinson Crusoe, we read, "I was born in the year 1632, in the city of York, of a good family, though not of that country, my father being a foreigner of Bremen, who settled first at Hull. He got a good estate by merchandise, and leaving off his trade, lived afterward at York, from whence he had married my mother, whose relations were named Robinson, a very good family in the country, and from whom I was called Robinson Kreuznach. But by the usual corruption of words in England, we are now called, nay, we call ourselves, and write our name, Crusoe, and so my companions always called me." In the periodic sentence, the main idea comes last, and is preceded by a series of relative introductions. This kind of sentence is often introduced by such words as that, if, since, because. The following is an example. "That through his own folly and lack of circumspection, He should have been reduced to such circumstances as to be forced to become a beggar on the streets, soliciting alms from those who had formerly been the recipients of his bounty, was a sore humiliation. On account of its name, many are liable to think the loose sentence an undesirable form in good composition, but this should not be taken for granted. In many cases it is preferable to the periodic form. As a general rule, in speaking, as opposed to writing, the loose form is to be preferred, inasmuch as when the periodic is employed in discourse, the listeners are apt to forget the introductory clauses before the final issue is reached. Both kinds are freely used in composition, but in speaking, the loose, which makes the direct statement at the beginning, should predominate. As to the length of sentences, much depends on the nature of the composition. However, the general rule may be laid down that short sentences are preferable to long ones. The tendency of the best writers of the present day is towards short, snappy, pithy sentences which rivet the attention of the reader. They adopt as their motto multum in parvo, much in little, and endeavour to pack a great deal in small space. Of course, the extreme of brevity is to be avoided. Sentences can be too short, too jerky, too brittle to withstand the test of criticism. The long sentence has its place, and a very important one. It is indispensable in argument, and often is very necessary to description, and also in introducing general principles which require elaboration. In employing the long sentence, the inexperienced writer should not strain after the heavy, ponderous type. Johnson and Carlyle used such a type, but remember, an ordinary mortal cannot wield the sledge-hammer of a giant. Johnson and Carlyle were intellectual giants, and few can hope to stand on the same literary pedestal. The tyro in composition should never seek after the heavy style. The best of all authors in the English language for style is Addison. Macaulay says, quote, "If you wish a style learned but not pedantic, elegant but not ostentatious, simple yet refined, you must give your days and nights to the volumes of Joseph Addison." Unquote. The simplicity, apart from the beauty, of Addison's writings causes us to reiterate the literary command, "Never use a big word when a little one will convey the same or a similar meaning." Macaulay himself is an elegant stylist to imitate. He is like a clear brook, kissed by the noonday sun, in the shining bed of which you can see and count the beautiful white pebbles. Goldsmith is another writer whose simplicity of style charms. The beginner should study these writers, make their works his vade-mecum. They have stood the test of time, and there has been no improvement upon them yet, nor is there likely to be, for their writing is as perfect as it is possible to be in the English language. Apart from their grammatical construction, there can be no fixed rules for the formation of sentences. The best plan is to follow the best authors, and these masters of language will guide you safely along the way. The paragraph. The paragraph may be defined as a group of sentences that are closely related in thought and which serve one common purpose. Not only do they preserve the sequence of the different parts into which a composition is divided, but they give a certain spice to the matter, like raisins in a plum pudding. A solid page of printed matter is distasteful to the reader. It taxes the eye and tends towards the weariness of monotony, but when it is broken up into sections, it loses much of its heaviness, and the consequent lightness gives it charm, as it were, to capture the reader. Paragraphs are like stepping stones on the bed of a shallow river, which enable the foot passenger to skip with ease from one to the other until he gets across. But if the stones are placed too far apart, In attempting to span the distance, one is liable to miss the mark, and fall in the water, and flounder about until he is again able to get a foothold. 'Tis the same with written language. The reader, by means of paragraphs, can easily pass from one portion of connected thought to another, and keep up his interest in the subject until he gets to the end. Throughout the paragraph there must be some connection in regard to the matter under consideration, a sentence dependency. For instance, in the same paragraph we must not speak of a house on fire and a runaway horse, unless there is some connection between the two. We must not write consecutively, "The fire raged with fierce intensity, consuming the greater part of the large building in a short time. The horse took fright and wildly dashed down the street, scattering pedestrians in all directions." These two sentences have no connection, and therefore should occupy separate and distinct places. But when we say, "The fire raged with fierce intensity, consuming the greater part of the large building in a short time, and the horse, taking fright at the flames, dashed wildly down the street, scattering pedestrians in all directions," there is a natural sequence, viz., the horse taking fright as a consequence of the flames, and hence the two expressions are combined in one paragraph. As in the case of words in sentences, the most important places in a paragraph are the beginning and the end. Accordingly, the first sentence and the last should, by virtue of their structure and nervous force, compel the reader's attention. It is usually advisable to make the first sentence short. The last sentence may be long or short, but in either case should be forcible. The object of the first sentence is to state a point clearly. The last sentence should enforce it. It is a custom of good writers to make the conclusion of the paragraph a restatement or counterpart or application of the opening. In most cases, a paragraph may be regarded as the elaboration of the principal sentence. The leading thought or idea can be taken as a nucleus, and around it constructed the different parts of the paragraph. Anyone can make a context for every simple sentence by asking himself questions in reference to the sentence. Thus, "The foreman gave the order" suggests at once several questions. What was the order? To whom did he give it? Why did he give it? What was the result? Etc. These questions, when answered, will depend upon the leading one and be an elaboration of it into a complete paragraph. If we examine any good paragraph, we shall find it made up of a number of items, each of which helps to illustrate, confirm, or enforce the general thought or purpose of the paragraph. Also, the transition from each item to the next is easy, natural, and obvious. The items seem to come of themselves. If, on the other hand, we detect in a paragraph one or more items which have no direct bearing, or if we are unable to proceed readily from item to item, especially if we are obliged to rearrange the items before we can perceive their full significance, then we are justified in pronouncing the paragraph construction faulty. No specific rules can be given as to the construction of paragraphs. The best advice is, study closely the paragraph structure of the best writers, for it is only through imitation, conscious or unconscious, of the best models that one can master the art. The best paragraphist in the English language for the essay is Macaulay. The best model to follow for the oratorical style is Edmund Burke, and for description and narration, probably the greatest master of paragraph is the American goldsmith Washington Irving. A paragraph is indicated in print by what is known as the indentation of the line, that is, by commencing it a space from the left margin. End of chapter 3.
Chapter 4. Figurative Language. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sean McGahey. Figures of speech. Definitions and examples. Use of figures. In figurative language, we employ words in such a way that they differ somewhat from their ordinary significance in commonplace speech and convey our meaning in a more vivid and impressive manner than when we use them in their everyday sense. Figures make speech more effective. They beautify and emphasize it and give to it a relish and piquancy as salt does to food. Besides, they add energy and force to expression so that it irresistibly compels attention and interest. There are 4 kinds of figures. 1. Figures of orthography, which change the spelling of a word. 2. Figures of etymology, which change the form of words. 3. Figures of syntax, which change the construction of sentences. 4. Figures of rhetoric, or the art of speaking and writing effectively, which change the mode of thought. We shall only consider the last mentioned here, as they are the most important, really giving to language the construction and style which makes it a fitting medium for the intercommunication of ideas. Figures of rhetoric have been variously classified, some authorities extending the list to a useless length. The fact is that any form of expression which conveys thought may be classified as a figure. The principal figures, as well as the most important and oftenest used, are simile, metaphor, personification, allegory, synecdoche, metonymy, exclamation, hyperbole, apostrophe, vision, antithesis, climax, epigram, interrogation, and irony. The first 4 are founded on resemblance, the second 6 on contiguity, and the third 5 on contrast. A simile, from the Latin similis, like, is the likening of one thing to another, a statement of the resemblance of objects, acts, or relations, as, in his awful anger he was like the storm-driven waves dashing against the rock. A simile makes the principal object plainer and impresses it more forcibly on the mind. His memory is like wax, to receive impressions, and like marble to retain them. This brings out the leading idea as to the man's memory in a very forceful manner. Contrast it with the simple statement, his memory is good. Sometimes simile is prostituted to a low and degrading use, as, his face was like a danger signal in a fog storm. Her hair was like a furze bush in bloom. He was to his lady love as a poodle to its mistress. Such burlesque is never permissible. Mere likeness, it should be remembered, does not constitute a simile. For instance, there is no simile when one city is compared to another. In order that there may be a rhetorical simile, the objects compared must be of different classes. Avoid the old trite similes such as comparing a hero to a lion. Such were played out long ago. And don't hunt for far-fetched similes. Don't say, her head was glowing as the glorious god of the day when he sets in a flambeau of splendor behind the purple-tinted hills of the west. It is much better to do without such a simile and simply say, she had fiery red hair. A metaphor, from the Greek metapherin, to carry over or transfer, is a word used to imply a resemblance, but instead of likening one object to another, as in the simile, we directly substitute the action or operation of one for another. If, of a religious man we say, he is as a great pillar upholding the church, the expression is a simile, but if we say, he is a great pillar upholding the church, it is a metaphor. The metaphor is a bolder and more lively figure than the simile. It is more like a picture, and hence the graphic use of metaphor is called word painting. It enables us to give the most abstract ideas form, color, and life. Our language is full of metaphors, and we often use them quite unconsciously. For instance, when we speak of the bed of a river, the shoulder of a hill, the foot of a mountain, the hands of a clock, the key of a situation, we are using metaphors. Don't use mixed metaphors, that is, different metaphors in relation to the same subject. Since it was launched, our project has met with much opposition, but while its flight has not reached the heights ambitioned, we are yet sanguine we shall drive it to success. Here our project begins as a ship, then becomes a bird, and finally winds up as a horse. Personification, from the Latin persona, person, and facere, to make, is the treating of an inanimate object as if it were animate, and is probably the most beautiful and effective of all the figures. The mountains sing together, the hills rejoice and clap their hands. Earth felt the wound, and nature from her seat, sighing through all her works, gave signs of woe. Personification depends much on a vivid imagination, and is adapted especially to poetical composition. It has two distinguishable forms. One, when personality is ascribed to the inanimate, as in the foregoing examples, and two, when some quality of life is attributed to the inanimate, as in a raging storm, an angry sea, a whistling wind, etc. An allegory, from the Greek allos, other, and agorian, to speak, is a form of expression in which the words are symbolical of something. It is very closely allied to the metaphor, in fact is a continued metaphor. Allegory, metaphor, and simile have 3 points in common. They are all founded on resemblance. Ireland is like a thorn in the side of England. This is a simile. Ireland is a thorn in the side of England. This is a metaphor. Once a great giant sprang up out of the sea and lived on an island all by himself. On looking around, he discovered a little girl on another small island nearby. He thought the little girl could be useful to him in many ways, so he determined to make her subservient to his will. He commanded her, but she refused to obey. Then he resorted to very harsh measures with the little girl, but still she remained obstinate and obdurate. He continued to oppress her until finally she rebelled and became as a thorn in his side to prick him for his evil attitude towards her. This is an allegory in which the giant plainly represents England and the little girl Ireland. The implication is manifest, though no mention is made of either country. Strange to say, the most perfect allegory in the English language was written by an almost illiterate and ignorant man, and written, too, in a dungeon cell. In The Pilgrim's Progress, Bunyan, the itinerant tinker, has given us by far the best allegory ever penned. Another good one is The Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. Synecdoche, from the Greek son with anekdexithai, to receive, is a figure of speech which represents either more or less than it literally denotes. By it we give to an object a name which literally expresses something more or something less than we intend. Thus, we speak of the world when we mean only a very limited number of people who compose the world, as, "The world treated him badly." Here we use the whole for a part, but the most common form of this figure is that in which a part is used for the whole, as, "I have 20 head of cattle." "One of his hands was assassinated," meaning one of his men. 20 sail came into the harbor, meaning 20 ships. "This is a fine marble," meaning a marble statue. Metonymy, from the Greek meta, change, and onyma, a name, is the designation of an object by one of its accompaniments. In other words, it is a figure by which the name of one object is put for another when the two are so related that the mention of one readily suggests the other. Thus, when we say of a drunkard, "He loves the bottle," we do not mean that he loves the glass receptacle, but the liquor that it is supposed to contain. Metonymy, generally speaking, has 3 subdivisions. 1. When an effect is put for cause or vice versa, as gray hair should be respected, meaning old age. He writes a fine hand, that is handwriting. 2. When the sign is put for the thing signified, as the pen is mightier than the sword, meaning literary power is superior to military force. 3. When the container is put for the thing contained, as the house was called to order, meaning the members in the house. Exclamation, from the Latin ex, out, and clamare, to cry, is a figure by which the speaker, instead of stating a fact, simply utters an expression of surprise or emotion. For instance, when he hears some harrowing tale of woe or misfortune, instead of saying, "It is a sad story," he exclaims, "What a sad story!" Exclamation may be defined as the vocal expression of feeling, though it is also applied to written forms which are intended to express emotion. Thus, in describing a towering mountain, we can write, "Heavens! What a piece of nature's handiwork! How majestic! How sublime! How awe-inspiring in its colossal impressiveness!" This figure rather belongs to poetry and animated oratory than to the cold prose of everyday conversation and writing. Hyperbole, from the Greek hyper, beyond, and balein, to throw, is an exaggerated form of the statement and simply consists in representing things to be either greater or less, better or worse, than they really are. Its object is to make the thought more effective by overstating it. Here are some examples. He was so tall his head touched the clouds. He was as thin as a poker. He was so light that a breath might have blown him away. Most people are liable to overwork this figure. We are all more or less given to exaggeration, and some of us do not stop there, but proceed onward to falsehood and downright lying. There should be a limit to hyperbole, and in ordinary speech and writing it should be well qualified and kept within reasonable bounds. An apostrophe, from the Greek apo, from, and straphen, to turn, is a direct address to the absent as present, to the inanimate as living, or to the abstract as personal. Thus, O illustrious Washington, father of our country, could you visit us now? My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. O grave, where is thy victory? O death, where is thy sting? This figure is very closely allied to personification. Vision, from the Latin videre, to see, consists in treating the past, the future, or the remote as if present in time or place. It is appropriate to animated description as it produces the effect of an ideal presence. The old warrior looks down from the canvas and tells us to be men worthy of our sires. This figure is much exemplified in the Bible. The book of Revelation is a vision of the future. The author who uses the figure most is Carlyle. An antithesis, from the Greek anti, against, and tithenai, to set, is founded on contrast. It consists of putting two unlike things in such a position that each will appear more striking by the contrast. Ring out the old, ring in the new. Ring out the false, ring in the true. Let us be friends in peace, but enemies in war. Here is a fine antithesis in the description of a steam engine. It can engrave a seal and crush masses of obdurate metal before it, draw out, without breaking, a thread as fine as a gossamer, and lift up a ship of war like a bauble in the air. It can embroider muslin and forge anchors, cut steel into ribbons, and impel loaded vessels against the fury of winds and waves. Climax, from the Greek climax, a ladder, is an arrangement of thoughts and ideas in a series, each part of which gets stronger and more impressive, until the last one, which emphasizes the force of all the preceding ones. He risked truth, he risked honor, he risked fame, he risked all that men hold dear. Yea, he risked life itself, and for what? For a creature who was not worthy to tie his shoe latchets when he was his better self. Epigram, from the Greek epi, upon, and graphein, to write, originally meant an inscription on a monument. Hence, it came to signify any pointed expression. It now means a statement or any brief saying in prose or poetry in which there is an apparent contradiction, as conspicuous for his absence. Beauty, when unadorned, is most adorned. He was too foolish to commit folly. He was so wealthy that he could not spare the money. Interrogation, from the Latin interrogatio, a question, is a figure of speech in which an assertion is made by asking a question, as, does God not show justice to all? Is he not doing right in his course? What can a man do under the circumstances? Irony, from the Greek ironsia, dissimulation, is a form of expression in which the opposite is substituted for what was intended, with the end in view that the falsity or absurdity may be apparent, as, Benedict Arnold was an honorable man. A Judas Iscariot never betrays a friend. You can always depend on the word of a liar. Irony is cousin germain to ridicule, derision, mockery, satire, and sarcasm. Ridicule implies laughter mingled with contempt. Derision is ridicule from a personal feeling of hostility. Mockery is insulting derision. Satire is witty mockery. Sarcasm is bitter satire, and irony is disguised satire. There are many other figures of speech which give piquancy to language and play upon words in such a way as to convey a meaning different from their ordinary signification in common everyday speech and writing. The golden rule for all is to keep them in harmony with the character and purpose of speech and composition. End of chapter 4.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Schallenberg. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 5. Punctuation. Principal points. Illustrations. Capital letters. Lindley Murray and Gould Brown laid down cast-iron rules for punctuation, but most of them have been broken long since and thrown into the junk-heap of disuse. They were too rigid, too strict, went so much into minutiae that they were more or less impractical to apply to ordinary composition. The manner of language, of style, and of expression has considerably changed since then. The old abstruse complex sentence with its hidden meanings has been relegated to the shade. There is little of prolixity or long drawn-out phrases, ambiguity of expression is avoided, and the aim is toward terseness, brevity, and clearness. Therefore punctuation has been greatly simplified, to such an extent, indeed, that it is now as much a matter of good taste and judgment as adherence to any fixed set of rules. Nevertheless, there are laws governing it which cannot be abrogated. Their principles must be rigidly and inviolably observed. The chief end of punctuation is to mark the grammatical connection and the dependence of the parts of a composition, but not the actual pauses made in speaking. Very often the points used to denote the delivery of a passage differ from those used when the passage is written. Nevertheless, several of the punctuation marks serve to bring out the rhetorical force of expression. The principal marks of punctuation are 1. The comma, 2. The semicolon, 3. The colon, 4. The period, 5. The interrogation, 6. The exclamation, 7. The dash, 8. The parenthesis, 9. The quotation. There are several other points or marks to indicate various relations, but properly speaking such come under the heading of printers' marks, some of which are treated elsewhere. Of the above, the first 4 may be styled the grammatical points, and the remaining 5 the rhetorical points. The comma. The office of the comma is to show the slightest separation which calls for punctuation at all. It should be omitted whenever possible. It is used to mark the least divisions of a sentence. 1. A series of words or phrases has its parts separated by commas. Lying, trickery, chicanery, perjury, were natural to him. The brave, daring, faithful soldier died facing the foe. If the series is in pairs, commas separate the pairs. Rich and poor, learned and unlearned, black and white, Christian and Jew, Mohammedan and Buddhist must pass through the same gate. 2. A comma is used before a short quotation. It was Patrick Henry who said, "Give me liberty or give me death." 3. When the subject of the sentence is a clause or a long phrase, a comma is used after such subject. That he has no reverence for the God I love, proves his insincerity. Simulated piety, with a black coat and a sanctimonious look, does not proclaim a Christian. 4. An expression used parenthetically should be enclosed by commas. The old man, as a general rule, takes a morning walk. 5. Words in apposition are set off by commas. McKinley, the president, was assassinated. 6. Relative clauses, if not restrictive, require commas. The book, which is the simplest, is often the most profound. 7. In continued sentences, each should be followed by a comma. Electricity lights our dwellings and streets, pulls cars, trains, drives the engines of our mills and factories. 8. When a verb is omitted, a comma takes its place. Lincoln was a great statesman. Grant, a great soldier. 9. The subject of address is followed by a comma. John, you are a good man. 10. In numeration, commas are used to express periods of 3 figures. Mountains 25,000 feet high. 1,000,000 dollars. The semicolon marks a slighter connection than the comma. It is generally confined to separating the parts of compound sentences. It is much used in contrasts. 1. Gladstone was great as a statesman, he was sublime as a man. 2. The semicolon is used between the parts of all compound sentences in which the grammatical subject of the second part is different from that of the first. The power of England relies upon the wisdom of her statesmen, the power of America upon the strength of her army and navy. 3. The semicolon is used before words and abbreviations which introduce particulars or specifications following after, such as namely, as, e.g., vid, i.e., etc. He had 3 defects, namely carelessness, lack of concentration, and obstinacy in his ideas. An island is a portion of land entirely surrounded by water, as Cuba. The names of cities should always commence with a capital letter, e.g., New York, Paris. The boy was proficient in one branch, viz., mathematics. No man is perfect, i.e., free from all blemish. The colon, except in conventional uses, is practically obsolete. 1. It is generally put at the end of a sentence introducing a long quotation. The cheers having subsided, Mr. Bryan spoke as follows: 2. It is placed before an explanation or illustration of the subject under consideration. This is the meaning of the term: 3. A direct quotation formally introduced is generally preceded by a colon. The great orator made this funny remark: 4. The colon is often used in the title of books, when the secondary or subtitle is in apposition to the leading one, and when the conjunction or is omitted. Acoustics: the science of sound. 5. It is used after the salutation in the beginning of letters. Sir, my dear sir, gentlemen, dear Mr. Jones, etc. In this connection, a dash very often follows the colon. 6. It is sometimes used to introduce details of a group of things already referred to in the mass. The boy's excuses for being late were: firstly, he did not know the time; secondly, he was sent on an errand; thirdly, he tripped on a rock and fell by the wayside. The period is the simplest punctuation mark. It is simply used to mark the end of a complete sentence that is neither interrogative nor exclamatory. 1. After every sentence conveying a complete meaning. Birds fly, period. Plants grow, period. Man is mortal, period. 2. In abbreviations, after every abbreviated word. RT, period, Rev, period, T, period, C, period, Alexander, D, period, D, period, L, period, L, period, D, period. 3. A period is used on the title pages of books after the name of the book, after the author's name, after the publisher's imprint. American Trails, period, by Theodore Roosevelt, period, New York, period, Scribner Company, period. The mark of interrogation is used to ask or suggest a question. 1. Every question admitting of an answer, even when it is not expected, should be followed by the mark of interrogation. Who has not heard of Napoleon? 2. When several questions have a common dependence, they should be followed by one mark of interrogation at the end of the series. Where now are the playthings and friends of my boyhood, the laughing boys, the winsome girls, the fond neighbors whom I loved? Mark of interrogation. 3. The mark is often used parenthetically to suggest doubt. In 1893, parenthetical mark of interrogation, Gladstone became converted to Home Rule for Ireland. The exclamation point should be sparingly used, particularly in prose. Its chief use is to denote emotion of some kind. 1. It is generally employed with interjections or clauses used as interjections. Alas! Exclamation point. I am forsaken. What a lovely landscape! Exclamation point. 2. Expressions of strong emotion call for the exclamation. Charge, Chester, charge! On, Stanley, on! 3. When the emotion is very strong, double exclamation points may be used. Assist him! Double exclamation point. I would rather assist Satan! Double exclamation point. The dash is generally confined to cases where there is a sudden break from the general run of the passage. Of all the punctuation marks, it is the most misused. 1. It is employed to denote sudden change in the construction or sentiment. The heroes of the Civil War, dash, how we cherish them. He was a fine fellow, dash, in his own opinion. 2. When a word or expression is repeated for oratorical effect, a dash is used to introduce the repetition. Shakespeare was the greatest of all poets, dash. Shakespeare, the intellectual ocean whose waves washed the continents of all thought. 3. The dash is used to indicate a conclusion without expressing it. He is an excellent man, but dash. 4. It is used to indicate what is not expected, or what is not the natural outcome of what has gone before. He delved deep into the bowels of the earth, and found instead of the hidden treasure, dash, a button. 5. It is used to denote the omission of letters or figures. J-N, J-S for John Jones. 1908-9 for 1908 and 1909. Matthew 7, 5-8 for Matthew 7, 5, 6, 7, and 8. 6. When an ellipsis of the words, namely, that is, to wit, etc., takes place, the dash is used to supply them. He excelled in 3 branches, dash, arithmetic, algebra, and geometry. 7. A dash is used to denote the omission of part of a word when it is undesirable to write the full word. He is somewhat of a R-L rascal. This is especially the case in profane words. 8. Between a citation and the authority for it there is generally a dash. All the world's a stage, dash, Shakespeare. 9. When questions and answers are put in the same paragraph, they should be separated by dashes. Are you a good boy? Yes, sir. Dash. Do you love study? I do. Marks of parenthesis are used to separate expressions inserted in the body of a sentence, which are illustrative of the meaning, but have no essential connection with the sentence, and could be done without. They should be used as little as possible, for they show that something is being brought into a sentence that does not belong to it. 1. When the unity of a sentence is broken, the words causing the break should be enclosed in parenthesis. We cannot believe a liar, parenthesis, and Jones is one, parenthesis, even when he speaks the truth. 2. In reports of speeches, marks of parenthesis are used to denote interpolations of approval or disapproval by the audience. The masses must not submit to the tyranny of the classes, parenthesis, hear, hear, parenthesis. We must show the trust magnates, parenthesis, groans, parenthesis, that they cannot ride roughshod over our dearest rights, parenthesis, cheers, parenthesis. If the gentleman from Ohio, parenthesis, Mr. Brown, parenthesis, will not be our spokesman, we must select another, parenthesis, a voice, get Robinson, parenthesis. When a parenthesis is inserted in the sentence where no comma is required, no point should be used before either parenthesis. When inserted at a place requiring a comma, if the parenthetical matter relates to the whole sentence, a comma should be used before each parenthesis. If it relates to a single word or short clause, no stop should come before it, but a comma should be put after the closing parenthesis. The quotation marks are used to show that the words enclosed by them are borrowed. 1. A direct quotation should be enclosed within the quotation marks. Abraham Lincoln said, quotation mark, "I shall make this land too hot for the feet of slaves." Quotation mark. 2. When a quotation is embraced within another, the contained quotation has only single marks. Franklin said, quotation, "Most men come to believe," single quotation mark, "honesty is the best policy," single quotation mark, quotation mark. 3. When a quotation consists of several paragraphs, the quotation marks should precede each paragraph. 4. Titles of books, pictures, and newspapers, when formally given, are quoted. 5. Often the names of ships are quoted, though there is no occasion for it. The apostrophe should come under the comma rather than under the quotation marks or double comma. The word is Greek and signifies a turning away from. The letter elided or turned away is generally an E. In poetry and familiar dialogue, the apostrophe marks the elision of a syllable, as I''ve for I have, thou''rt for thou art, you''ll for you will, etc. Sometimes it is necessary to abbreviate a word by leaving out several letters. In such case, the apostrophe takes the place of the omitted letters, as cont''d for continued. The apostrophe is used to denote the elision of the century in dates, where the century is understood, or to save the repetition of a series of figures, as the spirit of '76. I served in the army during the years 1895, '96, '97, '98, and '99. The principal use of the apostrophe is to denote the possessive case. All nouns in the singular number, whether proper names or not, and all nouns in the plural ending with any other letter than s, form the possessive by the addition of the apostrophe and the letter s. The only exceptions to this rule are, that, by poetical license, the additional s may be elided in poetry for the sake of the meter, and in the scriptural phrases, "for goodness' sake," "for conscience' sake," "for Jesus' sake," etc. Custom has done away with the s, and these phrases are now idioms of the language. All plural nouns ending in s form the possessive by the addition of the apostrophe only, as boys', horses'. The possessive case of the personal pronouns never take the apostrophe, as ours, yours, hers, theirs. Capital letters. Capital letters are used to give emphasis to or call attention to certain words to distinguish them from the context. In manuscripts they may be written small or large, and are indicated by lines drawn underneath, 2 lines for small capitals and 3 lines for capitals. Some authors, notably Carlyle, make such use of capitals that it degenerates into an abuse. They should only be used in their proper places, as given in the table below. 1. The first word of every sentence, in fact, the first word in writing of any kind, should begin with a capital, as T, time flies, M, my dear friend. 2. Every direct quotation should begin with a capital. Dewey said, F, fire when you're ready, Gridley. 3. Every line of poetry begins with a capital. B. Breathes there a man with soul so dead? 5. Every numbered clause calls for a capital. The witness asserts 1. T that he saw the man attacked. 2. T that he saw him fall. 3. T that he saw his assailant flee. The headings of essays and chapters should be wholly in capitals, as the following is all in capital letters. Chapter 8, Rules for Use of Capitals. 7. In the titles of books, nouns, pronouns, adjectives, and adverbs should begin with a capital, as J. Johnson's, L. Lives of the P. Poets. 8. In the Roman notation, numbers are denoted by capitals, as these are all capitalized: I, V, X, L, C, D, M, which stand for 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 50, 100, 500, and 1,000. 9. Proper names begin with a capital, as J. Jones, J. Johnson, C. Caesar, M. Mark, A. Antony, E. England, P. Pacific, C. Christmas. Such words as river, sea, mountain, etc., when used generally are common, not proper nouns, and require no capital. But when such are used with an adjective or adjunct to specify a particular object, they become proper names, and therefore require a capital, as M. Mississippi, R. River, N. North, S. Sea, A. Allegheny, M. Mountains, etc. In like manner, the cardinal points north, south, east, and west, when they are used to distinguish regions of a country, are capitals, as the N. North fought against the S. South. When a proper name is compounded with another word, the part which is not a proper name begins with a capital if it precedes, but with a small letter if it follows the hyphen, as P. Post Homeric, S. Sunday School. 10. Words derived from proper names require a capital, as A. American, I. Irish, C. Christian, A. Americanize, C. Christianize. In this connection, the names of political parties, religious sects, and schools of thought begin with capitals, as R. Republican, D. Democrat, W. Whig, C. Catholic, P. Presbyterian, R. Rationalists, F. Free, T. Thinkers. 11. The titles of honorable, state, and political offices begin with a capital, as P. President, C. Chairman, G. Governor, A. Alderman. 12. The abbreviations of learned titles and college degrees call for capitals, as the following letters are all capitalized: LL.D., MA, BS, etc. Also the seats of learning conferring such degrees, as H. Harvard, U. University, M. Manhattan, C. College, etc. 13. When such relative words as father, mother, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, etc., precede a proper name, they are written and printed with capitals, as F. Father, A. Abraham, M. Mother, E. Eddie, B. Brother, J. John, S. Sister, J. Jane, U. Uncle, J. Jacob, A. Aunt, E. Eliza. Father, when used to denote the early Christian writer, is begun with a capital. Augustine was one of the learned F. Fathers of the Church. 14. The names applied to the Supreme Being begin with capitals. capital G God, capital L Lord, capital C Creator, capital P Providence, capital A Almighty, capital T the, capital D Deity, capital H Heavenly, capital F Father, capital H Holy, capital O One. In this respect, the names applied to the Savior also require capitals. Capital J Jesus, capital C Christ, capital S Son of capital G God, capital M Man of capital G Galilee, capital T the, capital C Crucified, capital T the, capital A Anointed, capital O One. Also the designations of biblical characters as capital L Lily of capital I Israel, capital R Rose of capital S Sharon, capital C Comfortress of the capital A Afflicted, capital H Help of capital C Christians, capital P Prince of the capital A Apostles, capital S Star of the capital S C, etc. Pronouns referring to God and Christ take capitals, as capital H His work, the work of capital H Him, etc. 15. Expressions used to designate the Bible or any particular division of it begin with a capital, as capital H Holy, capital W Writ, capital T the, capital S Sacred, capital B Book, capital H Holy, capital B Book, capital G God's, capital W Word, capital O Old, capital T Testament, capital N New, capital T Testament, capital G Gospel of capital S Saint, capital M Matthew, capital S Seven, capital P Penitential, capital P Psalms. 16. Expressions based upon the Bible or in reference to biblical characters begin with a capital. Capital W Water of capital L Life, capital H Hope of capital M Men, capital H Help of capital C Christians, capital S Scourge of capital N Nations. 17. The names applied to the Evil One require capitals. Capital B Beelzebub, capital P Prince of capital D Darkness, capital S Satan, capital K King of capital H Hell, capital D Devil, capital I Incarnate, capital F Fiend, capital T Tempter of capital M Men, capital F Father of capital L Lies, capital H Hater of capital G Good. 18. Words of very special importance, especially those which stand out as the names of leading events in history, have capitals, as capital T the, capital R Revolution, capital T the, capital C Civil, capital W War, capital T the, capital M Middle, capital A Ages, capital T the, capital A Age of capital I Iron, etc. 19. Terms which refer to great events in the history of the race require capitals. Capital T the, capital F Flood, capital M Magna, capital C Carta, capital D Declaration of capital I Independence. 20. The names of the days of the week and the months of the year and the seasons are commenced with capitals. Capital M Monday, capital M March, capital A Autumn. 21. The pronoun I and the interjection O always require the use of capitals. In fact, all the interjections, when uttered as exclamations, commence with capitals. Capital A Alas, he is gone. Capital A Ah, capital I pitied him. 22. All noms de guerre, assumed names, as well as names given for distinction, call for capitals, as capital T the, capital W Wizard of the capital N North, capital P Paul, capital P Pry, capital T the, capital N Northern, capital G Jail, capital S Sandy, capital S Sanderson, P poor, R Robin, etc. 23. In personification, that is, when inanimate things are represented as endowed with life and action, the noun or object personified begins with a capital, as the starry N night shook the dew from her wings. Mild-eyed D day appeared. The O oak said to the B beech, I am stronger than you. End of chapter 5. Read by Kara Schallenberg, www.kray.org, on November 11th, 2006, in Oceanside, California.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rosalind Wills of Silver Spring, Maryland. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 6. Letter Writing. Principles of Letter Writing. Forms, Notes. Many people seem to regard letter writing as a very simple and easily acquired branch, but on the contrary it is one of the most difficult forms of composition and requires much patience and labor to master its details. In fact, there are very few perfect letter writers in the language. It constitutes the direct form of speech and may be called conversation at a distance. Its forms are so varied by every conceivable topic, written at all times by all kinds of persons in all kinds of moods and tempers, and addressed to all kinds of persons of various degrees in society and of different pursuits in life, that no fixed rules can be laid down to regulate its length, style, or subject matter. Only general suggestions can be made in regard to scope and purpose, and the forms of inditing set forth which custom and precedent have sanctioned. The principles of letter writing should be understood by everybody who has any knowledge of written language, for almost everybody at some time or other has necessity to address some friend or acquaintance at a distance, whereas comparatively few are called upon to direct their efforts towards any other kind of composition. Formerly, the illiterate countryman, when he had occasion to communicate with friends or relations, called in the peripatetic schoolmaster as his amanuensis, but this had one drawback. Secrets had to be poured into an ear other than that for which they were intended, and often the confidence was betrayed. Now that education is abroad in the land, there is seldom any occasion for any person to call upon the service of another to compose and write a personal letter. Very few nowadays are so grossly illiterate as not to be able to read and write. No matter how crude his effort may be, it is better for any one to write his own letters than trust to another. Even if he should commence, Dear friend, I lift up my pen to let ye know that I hove been sick for the past 3 weeks, hopping this will find ye the same. His spelling and construction can be excused in view of the fact that his intention is good and that he is doing his best to serve his own turn without depending upon others. The nature, substance, and tone of any letter depend upon the occasion that calls it forth, upon the person writing it, and upon the person for whom it is intended. Whether it should be easy or formal in style, plain or ornate, light or serious, gay or grave, sentimental or matter of fact, depend upon these 3 circumstances. In letter writing the first and most important requisites are to be natural and simple. There should be no straining after effect, but simply a spontaneous outpouring of thoughts and ideas as they naturally occur to the writer. We are repelled by a person who is stiff and labored in his conversation, and in the same way the stiff and labored letter bores the reader, whereas if it is light and in a conversational vein, it immediately engages his attention. The letter which is written with the greatest facility is the best kind of letter, because it naturally expresses what is in the writer. He has not to search for his words, they flow in a perfect unison with the ideas he desires to communicate. When you write to your friend John Brown to tell him how you spent Sunday, you have not to look around for the words or study set phrases with a view to please or impress Brown. You just tell him, the same as if he were present before you, how you spent the day, where you were, with whom you associated, and the chief incidents that occurred during the time. Thus you write natural, and it is such writing that is adapted to epistolary correspondence. There are different kinds of letters, each calling for a different style of address and composition. Nevertheless, the natural key should be maintained in all, that is to say, the writer should never attempt to convey an impression that he is other than what he is. It would be silly as well as vain for the common street laborer of a limited education to try to put on literary airs and emulate a college professor. He may have as good a brain, but it is not as well developed by education, and he lacks the polish which society confers. When writing a letter, the street laborer should bear in mind that only the letter of a street laborer is expected from him, no matter to whom his communication may be addressed, and that neither the grammar nor the diction of a Chesterfield or Gladstone is looked for in his language. Still, the writer should keep in mind the person to whom he is writing. If it is to an archbishop or some other great dignitary of church or state, it certainly should be couched in terms different from those he uses to John Brown, his intimate friend. Just as he cannot say "Dear John" to an archbishop, no more can he address him in the familiar words he uses to his friend of everyday acquaintance and companionship. Yet there is no great learning required to write to an archbishop, no more than to an ordinary individual. All the laborer needs to know is the form of address and how to properly utilize his limited vocabulary to the best advantage. Here is the form for such a letter. 17 2nd Avenue, New York City, January 1st, 1910. Most Reverend P. A. Jordan, Archbishop of New York. Most Reverend and dear Sir, while sweeping the crossing at 5th Avenue and 50th Street on last Wednesday morning, I found the enclosed $50 bill, which I am sending to you in the hope that it may be restored to the rightful owner. I beg you will acknowledge receipt, and should the owner be found I trust you will notify me, so that I may claim some reward for my honesty. I am, most Reverend and dear Sir, very respectfully yours, Thomas Jones. Observe the brevity of the letter. Jones makes no suggestions to the Archbishop how to find the owner, for he knows the course the Archbishop will adopt of having the finding of the bill announced from the church pulpits. Could Jones himself find the owner, there would be no occasion to apply to the Archbishop. This letter, it is true, is different from that which he would send to Brown. Nevertheless, it is simple without being familiar, is just a plain statement, and is as much to the point for its purpose as if it were garnished with rhetoric and words of learned length and thundering sound. Letters may be divided into those of friendship, acquaintanceship, those of business relations, those written in an official capacity by public servants, those designed to teach, and those which give accounts of the daily happenings on the stage of life, in other words, newsletters. Letters of friendship are the most common, and their style and form depend upon the degree of relationship and intimacy existing between the writers and those addressed. Between relatives and intimate friends, the beginning and end may be in the most familiar form of conversation, either affectionate or playful. They should, however, never overstep the boundaries of decency and propriety, for it is well to remember that, unlike conversation, which is only heard by the ears for which it is intended, written words may come under other eyes than those for whom they were designed. Therefore it is well never to write anything which the world may not read without detriment to your character or your instincts. You can be joyful, playful, jocose, give vent to your feelings, but never stoop to low language, and above all to language savoring in the slightest degree of moral impropriety. Business letters are of the utmost importance on account of the interests involved. The business character of a man or of a firm is often judged by the correspondence. On many occasions, letters, instead of developing trade and business interests and gaining clientele, predispose people unfavorably towards those whom they are designed to benefit. Ambiguous, slipshod language is a detriment to success. Business letters should be clear, concise, to the point, and above all honest, giving no wrong impressions or holding out any inducements that cannot be fulfilled. In business letters, just as in business conduct, honesty is always the best policy. Official letters are mostly always formal. They should possess clearness, brevity, and dignity of tone to impress the receivers with the proper respect for the national laws and institutions. Letters designed to teach, or didactic letters, are in a class all by themselves. They are simply literature in the form of letters, and are employed by some of the best writers to give their thoughts and ideas a greater emphasis. The most conspicuous example of this kind of composition is the book on etiquette by Lord Chesterfield, which took the form of a series of letters to his son. News letters are accounts of world happenings and descriptions of ceremonies and events sent into the newspapers. Some of the best authors of our time are newspaper men who write in an easy flowing style which is most readable, full of humor and fancy, and which carries one along with breathless interest from beginning to end. The principal parts of a letter are 1. The heading or introduction. 2. The body or substance of the letter. 3. The subscription, or closing expression and signature. 4. The address or direction on the envelope. For the body of a letter no forms or rules can be laid down, as it altogether depends upon the nature of the letter and the relationship between the writer and the person addressed. There are certain rules which govern the other three features and which custom has sanctioned. Everyone should be acquainted with these rules. The heading. The heading has three parts, viz., the name of the place, the date of writing, and the designation of the person or persons addressed. Thus, 73 New Street, Newark, New Jersey, February 1st, 1910. Messrs. Ginn and Company, New York. Gentlemen. The name of the place should never be omitted. In cities, street and number should always be given, and except when the city is large and very conspicuous, so that there can be no question as to its identity with another of the same or similar name, the abbreviation of the state should be appended, as in the above, Newark, N.J. There is another Newark in the state of Ohio. Owing to failure to comply with this rule, many letters go astray. The date should be on every letter, especially business letters. The date should never be put at the bottom in a business letter, but in friendly letters this may be done. The designation of the person or persons addressed differs according to the relations of the correspondence. Letters of friendship may begin in many ways according to the degrees of friendship or intimacy. Thus, my dear wife, my dear husband, my dear friend, my darling mother, my dearest love, dear aunt, dear uncle, dear George, etc. To mark a lesser degree of intimacy, such formal designations as the following may be employed. Dear Sir, my dear Sir, dear Mr. Smith, dear Madam, etc. For clergymen who have the degree of Doctor of Divinity, the designation is as follows: Reverend Alban Johnson, D.D. My dear Sir, or Reverend and dear Sir, or more familiarly, Dear Dr. Johnson. Bishops of the Roman and Anglican communions are addressed as Right Reverend. The Right Reverend the Bishop of Long Island, or the Right Reverend Frederick Burgess, Bishop of Long Island. Right Reverend and dear Sir. Archbishops of the Roman Church are addressed as Most Reverend, and cardinals as Eminence. Thus, the Most Reverend Archbishop Katzer, Most Reverend and dear Sir. His Eminence James Cardinal Gibbons, Archbishop of Baltimore. May it please your Eminence. The title of the governor of a state or territory and of the President of the United States is Excellency. However, Honorable is more commonly applied to governors. His Excellency William Howard Taft, President of the United States. Sir. His Excellency Charles Evans Hughes, Governor of the State of New York. Sir. Honorable Franklin Fort, Governor of New Jersey. Sir. The general salutation for officers of the Army and Navy is Sir. The rank and station should be indicated in full at the head of the letter, thus: General Joseph Thompson, commanding the 7th Infantry. Sir. Rear Admiral Robert Atkinson, commanding the Atlantic Squadron. Sir. The title of officers of the civil government is Honorable, and they are addressed as Sir. Honorable Nelson Duncan, Senator from Ohio. Sir. Honorable Norman Wingfield, Secretary of the Treasury. Sir. Honorable Rupert Gresham, Mayor of New York. Sir. Presidents and professors of colleges and universities are generally addressed as Sir or Dear Sir. Professor Ferguson Jenks, President of University. Sir or Dear Sir. Presidents of societies and associations are treated as businessmen and addressed as Sir or Dear Sir. Mr. Joseph Banks, President of the Night Owls. Dear Sir or Sir. Doctors of medicine are addressed as Sir, my dear Sir, and more familiarly, my dear Doctor or Dear Doctor, as Ryerson Pitkin, M.D. Sir, Dear Sir, my dear Doctor. Ordinary people with no degrees or titles are addressed as Mr. and Mrs. and are designed Dear Sir, Dear Madam, and an unmarried woman of any age is addressed on the envelope as Miss So-and-so, but always designed in the letter as Dear Madam. The plural of Mr., as in addressing a firm, is Messrs., and the corresponding salutation is Dear Sirs or Gentlemen. In England Esquire is used for Mr. as a mark of slight superiority, and in this country it is sometimes used, but it is practically obsolete. Custom is against it, and American sentiment as well. If it is used, it should only be applied to lawyers and justices of the peace. Subscription. The subscription, or ending of a letter, consists of the term of respect or affection and the signature. The term depends upon the relation of the person addressed. Letters of friendship can close with such expressions as yours lovingly, yours affectionately, devotedly yours, ever yours, etc., as between husbands and wives or between lovers. Such gushing terminations as your own darling, your own dovey, and other pet and silly endings should be avoided, as they denote shallowness. Love can be strongly expressed without dipping into the nonsensical and the farcical. Formal expressions of subscription are yours sincerely, yours truly, respectfully yours, and the like, and these may be varied to denote the exact bearing or attitude the writer wishes to assume to the person addressed, as very sincerely yours, very respectfully yours, with deep respect yours very truly, etc. Such elaborate endings as in the meantime with the highest respect I am yours to command. I have the honor to be, sir, your humble servant. With great expression of esteem I am sincerely yours. Believe me, my dear sir, ever faithfully yours, are condemned as savoring too much of affectation. It is better to finish formal letters without any such qualifying remarks. If you are writing to Mr. Ryan to tell him you have a house for sale, after describing the house and stating the terms, simply sign yourself, your obedient servant, yours very truly, yours with respect, James Wilson. Don't say you have the honor to be anything or ask him to believe anything. All you want to tell him is that you have a house for sale and that you are sincere, or hold him in respect as a prospective customer. Don't abbreviate the signature as yours respectfully and always make your sex obvious. Write plainly, yours truly, John Field, and not J. Field, so that the person to whom you send it may not take you for Jane Field. It is always best to write the first name in full. Married women should prefix Mrs. to their names, as very sincerely yours, Mrs. Theodore Watson. If you are sending a letter acknowledging a compliment or some kindness done, you may say yours gratefully or yours very gratefully, in proportion to the act of kindness received. It is not customary to sign letters of degrees or titles after your name, except you are a lord, earl, or duke, and only known by the title. But as we have no such titles in America, it is unnecessary to bring this matter into consideration. Don't sign yourself Sincerely yours, Obadiah Jackson, M.A. or LL.D. If you're an M.A. or an LL.D., people generally know it without your sounding your own trumpet. Many people, and especially clergymen, are fond of flaunting after their names degrees they have received honoris causa, that is, degrees as a mark of honor without examination. Such degrees should be kept in the background. Many a deadhead has these degrees which he could never have earned by brain work. Married women whose husbands are alive may sign the husband's name with the prefix Mrs. Thus, yours sincerely, Mrs. William Southey. But when the husband is dead, the signature should be yours sincerely, Mrs. Sarah Southey. So when we receive a letter from a woman we are enabled to tell whether she has a husband living or is a widow. A woman separated from her husband but not a divorcee should not sign his name. Address. The address of a letter consists of the name, the title, and the residence. Mr. Hugh Black, 112 Southgate Street, Altoona, Pennsylvania. Intimate friends have often familiar names for each other, such as pet names, nicknames, etc., which they use in the freedom of conversation, but such names should never, under any circumstances, appear on the envelope. The subscription on the envelope should always be written with propriety and correctness and as if penned by an entire stranger. The only difficulty in the envelope inscription is the title. Every man is entitled to Mr., and every lady to Mrs., and every unmarried lady to Miss. Even a boy is entitled to Master. When more than one is addressed, the title is Messrs. Mesdames is sometimes written of women. If the person addressed has a title, it is courteous to use it, but titles never must be duplicated. Thus we can write Robert Stitt, M.D., but never Dr. Robert Stitt, M.D., or Mr. Robert Stitt, M.D. In writing to a medical doctor it is well to indicate his profession by the letters M.D., so as to differentiate him from a D.D. It is better to write Robert Stitt, M.D., than Dr. Robert Stitt. In the case of clergymen the prefix Reverend is retained even when they have other titles, as Reverend Tracy Tooke, LL.D. When a person has more titles than one it is customary to only give him the leading one. Thus, instead of writing Reverend Samuel Macomb, B.A., M.A., B.Sc., Ph.D., LL.D., D.D., the form employed is Reverend Samuel Macomb, LL.D. LL.D. is appended in preference to D.D. because in most cases the Rev implies a D.D., while comparatively few with the prefix Rev are entitled to LL.D. In the case of honorables, such as governors, judges, members of Congress, and others of the civil government, the prefix Hon. Does away with Mr. and Esquire. Thus we write Honorable Josiah Snifkins, not Honorable Mr. Josiah Snifkins or Honorable Josiah Snifkins, Esquire. Though this prefix HON is also often applied to governors, they should be addressed as Excellency. For instance, His Excellency Charles E. Hughes, Albany, New York. In writing to the President, the superscription on the envelope should be To the President, Executive Mansion, Washington, D.C. Professional men, such as doctors and lawyers, as well as those having legitimately earned college degrees, may be addressed on the envelopes by their titles, as Jonathan Janeway, M.D., Hubert Houston, B.L., Matthew Marks, M.A., etc. The residence of the person addressed should be plainly written out in full. The street and numbers should be given and the city or town written very legibly. If the abbreviation of the state is liable to be confounded or confused with that of another, then the full name of the state should be written. In writing the residence on the envelope, instead of putting it all in one line, as is done at the head of a letter, each item of the residence forms a separate line. Thus, Liberty, Sullivan County, New York. 215 Minna Street, San Francisco, California. There should be left a space for the postage stamp in the upper right-hand corner. The name and title should occupy a line that is about central between the top of the envelope and the bottom. The name should be neither too much to right or left, but located in the center, the beginning and end at equal distances from either end. In writing to large business concerns which are well known or to public or city officials, it is sometimes customary to leave out number and street. Thus, Messrs. Siegel Cooper Company, New York City. Honorable William J. Gaynor, New York City. Notes. Notes may be regarded as letters in miniature confined chiefly to invitations, acceptances, regrets, and introductions, and modern etiquette tends towards informality of their composition. Card etiquette, in fact, has taken the place of ceremonious correspondence, and informal notes are now the rule. Invitations to dinner and receptions are now mostly written on cards. Regrets are sent back on visiting cards with just the one word, regrets, plainly written thereon. Often on cards and notes of invitation we find the letters RSVP at the bottom. These letters stand for the French Répondez s'il vous plaît, which means reply if you please. But there is no necessity to put this on an invitation card, as every well-bred person knows that a reply is expected. In writing notes to young ladies of the same family it should be noted that the eldest daughter of the house is entitled to the designation Miss, without any Christian name, only the surname appended. Thus, if there are 3 daughters in the Thompson family, Martha, the eldest, Susan and Jemima, Martha is addressed as Miss Thompson and the other 2 as Miss Susan Thompson and Miss Jemima Thompson, respectively. Don't write the word addressed on the envelope of a note. Don't seal a note delivered by a friend. Don't write a note on a postal card. Here are a few common forms. Formal invitations. Mr. and Mrs. Henry Wagstaff request the honor of Mr. McAdoo's presence on Friday evening, June 15th, at 8 o'clock to meet the Governor of the Fort. 19 Woodbine Terrace, June 8th, 1918. This is an invitation to a formal reception calling for evening dress. Here is Mr. McAdoo's reply in the third person. Mr. McAdoo presents his compliments to Mr. and Mrs. Henry Wagstaff and accepts with great pleasure their invitation to meet the Governor of the Fort on the evening of June 15th. 215 Beacon Street, June 10, 1910. Here is how Mr. McAdoo might decline the invitation. Mr. McAdoo regrets that owing to a prior engagement he must forego the honor of paying his respects to Mr. and Mrs. Wagstaff and the Governor of the Fort on the evening of June 15th. 215 Beacon Street, June 10, 1910. Here is a note addressed, say, to Mr. Jeremiah Reynolds. Mr. and Mrs. Oldham at home on Wednesday evening, October 9th from 7 to 11. 21 Ashland Avenue, October 5th. Mr. Reynolds makes reply. Mr. Reynolds accepts with high appreciation the honor of Mr. and Mrs. Oldham's invitation for Wednesday evening, October 9th. Windsor Hotel, October 7th. Or, Mr. Reynolds regrets that his duties render it impossible for him to accept Mr. and Mrs. Oldham's kind invitation for the evening of October 9th. Windsor Hotel, October 7th. Sometimes less informal invitations are sent on small, specially designed note paper in which the first person takes the place of the third. Thus, 360 Pine Street, December 11th, 1910. Dear Mr. Saintsbury, Mr. Johnson and I should be much pleased to have you dine with us and a few friends next Thursday the 15th at 7:30. Yours sincerely, Emma Burnside. Mr. Saintsbury's reply. 57 Carlisle Strand, December 13th, 1910. Dear Mrs. Burnside, let me accept very appreciatively your invitation to dine with Mr. Burnside and you on next Thursday the 15th at 7:30. Yours sincerely, Henry Saintsbury. Mrs. Alexander Burnside. Notes of Introduction. Notes of introduction should be very circumspect as the writers are in reality vouching for those whom they introduce. Here is a specimen of such a note. 603 Lexington Avenue, New York City, June 15, 1910. Rev. Cyrus C. Wiley, D.D., Newark, New Jersey. My dear Dr. Wiley, I take the liberty of presenting to you my friend Stacy Redfern, M.D., a young practitioner, who is anxious to locate in Newark. I have known him many years and can vouch for his integrity and professional standing. Any courtesy and kindness which you may show him will be very much appreciated by me. Very sincerely yours, Franklin Jewett. End of Chapter 6.
How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 7, Errors. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 7, Errors. Mistakes, slips of authors, examples and corrections. Errors of redundancy. In the following examples, the word or words in parentheses and emphasized are uncalled for and should be omitted. 1. Fill the glass full. 2. They appeared to be talking together on private affairs. 3. I saw the boy and his sister both in the garden. 4. He went into the country last week and returned back yesterday. 5. The subject matter of his discourse was excellent. 6. You need not wonder that the subject matter of his discourse was excellent. It was taken from the Bible. 7. They followed after him, but could not overtake him. 8. The same sentiments may be found throughout the whole of the book. I was very ill every day of my life last week. 10. That was the sum and substance of his discourse. 11. He took wine and water and mixed them both together. 12. He descended down the steps to the cellar. 13. He fell down from the top of the house. 14. I hope you will return again soon. 15. The things he took away he restored again. 16. The thief who stole my watch was compelled to restore it back again. 17. It is equally the same to me whether I have it today or tomorrow. 18. She says the report is false. And he replied, says he, if it be not correct, I have been misinformed. 19. I took my place in the cars to go to New York. 20. They need not to call upon him. 21. Nothing else but that would satisfy him. 22. Whenever I ride in the cars, I always find it prejudicial to my health. 23. He was the first of all at the meeting. 24. He was the tallest of all the brothers. 25. You are the tallest of all your family. 26. Whenever I pass the house, he is always at the door. 27. The rain has penetrated through the roof. 28. Besides my uncle and aunt, there was also my grandfather at the church. 29. It should ever be your constant endeavor to please your family. 30. If it is true, as you have heard, then his situation is indeed pitiful. 31. Either this here man or that there woman has got it. 32. Where is the fire at? 33. Did you sleep in church? Not that I know of. 34. I have never before in my life met with such a stupid man. 35. 4. Why did he postpone it? 36. Because why he could not attend. 37. What age is he? Why, I don't know. 38. He called on me to ask my opinion. 39. I don't know where I am at. 40. I looked in at the window. 41. I passed by the house. 42. He always came every Saturday. 43. Moreover, also we wish to say he was in error. 44. It is not long ago since he was here. 45. 2 men went into the wood in order to cut down trees. Further examples of redundancy might be multiplied. It is very common in newspaper writing where not alone single words but entire phrases are sometimes brought in, which are unnecessary to the sense or explanation of what is written. Grammatical errors of standard authors. Even the best speakers and writers are sometimes caught napping. Many of our standard authors to whom we have been accustomed to look up as infallible have sinned more or less against the fundamental principles of grammar by breaking the rules regarding one or more of the 9 parts of speech. In fact, some of them have recklessly trespassed against all 9, and still they sit on their pedestals of fame for the admiration of the crowd. Macaulay mistreated the article. He wrote that a historian should not record trifles is perfectly true. He should have used an. Dickens also used the article incorrectly. He refers to Robinson Crusoe as an universally popular book instead of a universally popular book. The relation between nouns and pronouns has always been a stumbling block to speakers and writers. Hallam, in his Literature of Europe, writes, "No one as yet had exhibited the structure of the human kidneys, Vesalius having only examined them in dogs." This means that Vesalius examined human kidneys in dogs. The sentence should have been, "No one has yet exhibited the kidneys in human beings, Vesalius having examined such organs in dogs only." Sir Arthur Helps, in writing of Dickens, states, "I knew a brother author of his who received such criticisms from him, Dickens, very lately, and profited by it. Instead of it, the word should be them to agree with criticisms." Here are a few other pronominal errors from leading authors. Sir Thomas More in general so writes it, although not many others so late as him. Should be he. Trench's English Past and Present. "What should we gain by it but that we should speedily become as poor as them. Should be they. Alison's essay on Macaulay. If the king gives us leave, you or I may as lawfully preach as them that do. Should be they or those, the latter having persons understood. Hobbes's History of Civil Wars. The drift of all his sermons was to prepare the Jews for the reception of a prophet mightier than him, and whose shoes he was not worthy to bear. Should be he. Atterbury's Sermons. Phalaris, who was so much older than her. Should be she. Bentley's Dissertation on Phalaris. King Charles, and more than him, the Duke and the Popish faction, were at liberty to form new schemes. Should be than he in Bolingbroke's Dissertation on Parties. We contributed a third more than the Dutch, who were obliged to the same proportion more than us. Should be than we. Swift's Conduct of the Allies. In all the above examples, the objective cases of the pronouns have been used, while the construction calls for the nominative case. Let thou and I the battle try. Anonymous. Here let is the governing verb and requires an objective case after it. Therefore, instead of thou and I, the word should be you, singular, and me. Forever in this humble cell, let thee and I, my fair one, dwell. Prior. Here thee and I should be the objectives you and me. The use of the relative pronoun trips the greatest number of authors. Even in the Bible we find the relatively wrongly translated, "Whom do men say that I am?" in St. Matthew. "Whom think ye that I am?" the Acts of the Apostles. Who should be written in both cases because the word is not in the objective, governed by say or think, but in the nominative, dependent on the verb am. Who should I meet at the coffee house t'other night but my old friend Steele? It is another pattern of this answerer's fair dealing to give us hints that the author is dead, and yet lay the suspicion upon somebody, I know not who, in the country. Swift's Tale of a Tub. My son is going to be married to I don't know who. Goldsmith's Good-Natured Man. The nominative who in the above examples should be the objective whom. The plural nominative ye of the pronoun thou is very often used for the objective you, as in the following. His wrath, which will one day destroy ye both. Milton. The more shame for ye, holy men, I thought ye. Shakespeare. I feel the gales that from ye blow. Gray. Tyrants dread ye lest your just decree transfer the power and set the people free. Prior. Many of the great writers have played havoc with the adjective in the indiscriminate use of the degrees of comparison. Of two forms of the same word, use the fittest. Morel. The author here, in trying to give good advice, sets a bad example. He should have used the comparative degree fitter. Adjectives which have a comparative or superlative signification do not admit the addition of the words more, most, or the terminations est. Hence the following examples break this rule. Money is the most universal incitement of human misery. Gibbon's Decline and Fall. The chiefest of which was known by the name Archon among the Grecians. Dryden's Life of Plutarch. The chiefest and largest are removed to certain magazines they call libraries. Swift's The Battle of the Books. The two chiefest properties of air, its gravity and elastic force, have been discovered by mechanical experiments. Arbuthnot. From these various causes, which in greater or lesser degree affect every individual in the colony, the indignation of the people became general. Robertson's History of America. The extremest parts of the earth were meditating a submission. Atterbury's Sermons. From these various causes, which in greater or lesser degree affected every individual in the colony, the ingredients of the people became general. Robertson's History of America. The extremest parts of the earth were meditating a submission. Attenborough's Sermons. The last are indeed more preferable, because they are founded on some new knowledge or improvement in the mind of man. Addison, Spectator. This was, in reality, the easiest manner of the two. Shaftesbury, Advice to an Author. In every well-formed mind, this second desire seemed to be the strongest of the two. Smith's Theory of Moral Sentiments. In these examples, the superlative is wrongly used for the comparative. When only two objects are compared, the comparative form must be used. Of impossibility there are no degrees of comparison, yet we find the following. As it was impossible they should know the words, thoughts, and secret actions of all men, so it was more impossible they should pass judgment on them according to these things. Whitby's Necessity of the Christian Religion. A great number of authors employ adjectives for adverbs. Thus we find, I shall endeavor to live hereafter suitable to a man in my station. Addison. I can never think so very mean of him. Bentley's Dissertation on Phalaris. His expectations run high, and the fund to supply them is extreme scanty. Lancaster's Essay on Delicacy. The commonest error in the use of the verb is the disregard of the concord between the verb and its subject. This occurs most frequently when the subject and the verb are widely separated, especially if some other noun of a different number immediately precedes the verb. False concords occur very often after either, or, neither, nor, and much, more, many, everyone, each. Here are a few authors' slips. The terms in which the sale of a patent were communicated to the public. Junius's Letters. The richness of her arms and apparel were conspicuous. Gibbon's Decline and Fall. Everyone of this grotesque family were the creatures of national genius. Disraeli. He knows not what spleen, languor, or listlessness are. Blair's Sermons. Each of these words imply some pursuit or object relinquished. Blair's Sermons. Magnus, with 4,000 of his supposed accomplices, were put to death. Gibbon. No nation gives greater encouragement to learning than we do, yet at the same time none are so injudicious in the application. Goldsmith. There's 2 or 3 of us have seen strange sights. Shakespeare. The past participle should not be used for the past tense, yet the learned Byron overlooked this fact. He thus writes in the Lament of Tasso, "And with my years my soul begun to pant with feeling of strange tumult and soft pain." Here is another example from Savage Wanderer in which there is double sinning. From liberty each nobler science sprung, a Bacon brightened and a Spencer sung. Other breaches in regard to the participles occur in the following. Every book ought to be read with the same spirit and the same manner as it is writ. Fielding's Tom Jones. The court of Augustus had not wore off the manners of the Republic. Hume's Essays. Moses tells us that the fountains of the earth were broke open or clove asunder. Burnet. A free constitution when it has been shook by the iniquity of former administrations. Bolingbroke. In this respect the seeds of future divisions were sowed abundantly. Bolingbroke. In the following example the present participle is used for the infinitive mood. It is easy distinguishing the rude fragment of a rock from the splinter of a statue. Gilfillan's Literary Portraits. Distinguishing here should be replaced by to distinguish. The rules regarding shall and will are violated in the following. If we look within the rough and awkward outside, we will be richly rewarded by its perusal. Gilfillan's Literary Portraits. If I should declare them and speak of them, they should be more than I am able to express. Prayer Book Revision of Psalm 11. If I would declare them and speak of them, they are more than can be numbered. Prayer Book Revision of Psalms 11. Without having attended to this, we will be at a loss in understanding several passages in the classics. Blair's Lectures. We know to what cause our past reverses have been owing, and we will have ourselves to blame if they are again incurred. Allison's History of Europe. Adverbial mistakes often occur in the best writers. The adverb rather is a word very frequently misplaced. Archbishop Trench, in his English Past and Present, writes, "It rather modified the structure of our sentences than the elements of our vocabulary." This should have been written, "It modified the structure of our sentences rather than the elements of our vocabulary." So far as his mode of teaching goes, he is rather a disciple of Socrates than of St. Paul or Wesley. Thus writes Leslie Stevens of Dr. Johnson. He should have written, "So far as his mode of teaching goes, he is a disciple of Socrates rather than of St. Paul or Wesley's." The preposition is a part of speech which is often wrongly used by some of the best writers. Certain nouns, adjectives, and verbs require particular prepositions after them. For instance, the word different always takes the preposition from after it. Prevail takes upon. Adverse takes to. Accord takes with, and so on. In the following examples, the prepositions in parentheses and emphasized are the ones that should have been used. He found the greatest difficulty in writing. Hume's History of English. If a policy can prevail upon, over, force. Addison. He made the discovery and communicated to, with, his friends. Swift's Tale of a Tub. Every office of command should be entrusted to persons in, whom the Parliament shall confide. Macaulay. Several of the most celebrated writers infringe the canons of style by placing prepositions at the end of sentences. For instance, Carlyle, in referring to the study of Burns, writes, "Our own contributions to it, we are aware, can be but scanty and feeble, but we offer them with good will, and trust they may meet with acceptance from those they are intended for whom they are intended," he should have written. Most writers have some one vein which they peculiarly and obviously excel in. William Minto. This sentence should read, "Most writers have some one vein in which they peculiarly and obviously excel." Many authors use redundant words which repeat the same thought and idea. This is called tautology. Notwithstanding which, however, poor Polly embraced them all around. Dickens. I judged that they would mutually find each other. Crockett. As having created a joint partnership between the two powers in the Morocco question. The Times. The only sensible position there seems to be is to frankly acknowledge our ignorance of what lies beyond. Daily Telegraph. Lord Rosebery has not budgeted from his position, splendid no doubt, of lonely isolation. The Time. Miss Fox was often in the habit of assuring Mrs. Chick. Dickens. The deck, it was their field of fame. Campbell. He had come up one morning, as was now frequently his wont. Trollope. The counsellors of the Sultan continue to remain skeptical. The Times. Seriously, and apart from jesting. This is no light matter. Bagehot. To go back to your own country with the consciousness that you go back with, the sense of duty well done. Lord Halsbury. The Peresviet lost both her fighting tops and, in appearance, looked the most damaged of all the ships. The Times. Counsel admitted that was a fair suggestion to make, but he submitted that it was borne out by the surrounding circumstances. The Times. Another unnecessary use of words and phrases is that which is termed circumlocution, going around the bush when there is no occasion for it, save to fill space. It may be likened to a person walking the distance of two sides of a triangle to reach the objective point. For instance, in the quotation, Pope professed to have learned his poetry from Dryden, whom, whenever an opportunity was presented, he praised through the whole period of his existence with unrivalled liberality, and perhaps his character may receive some illustration of a comparison he instituted between him and the man whose pupil he was. Much of the verbiage may be eliminated and the sentence thus condensed. Pope professed himself the pupil of Dryden, whom he lost no opportunity of praising, and his character may be illustrated by a comparison with his master. His life was brought to a close in 1910, at an age not far from the one fixed by the sacred writer as the term of human existence. This in brevity can be put, his life was brought to a close at the age of 70. Or better yet, he died at the age of 70. The day was intensely cold, so cold in fact that the thermometer crept down to the 0 mark. Can be expressed, the day was so cold the thermometer registered 0. Many authors resort to circumlocution for the purpose of padding, that is, filling space, or when they strike a snag in writing upon subjects of which they know little or nothing. The young writer should steer clear of it, and learn to express his thoughts and ideas as briefly as possible, commensurate with lucidity of expression. Volumes of errors, in fact, in grammar, diction, and general style, could be selected from the works of the great writers, a fact which eloquently testifies that no one is infallible, and that the very best is liable to err at times. However, most of the erring in the case of these writers arises from carelessness or hurry, not from lack of knowledge. As a general rule, it is in writing that the scholar is liable to slip. In oral speech he seldom makes a blunder. In fact, there are many people who are perfect masters of speech, who never make a blunder in conversation, yet who are ignorant of the very principles of grammar and would not know how to write a sentence correctly on paper. Such persons have been accustomed from infancy to hear the language spoken correctly, and so the use of the proper words and the forms becomes a second nature to them. A child can learn what is right as easy as what is wrong, and whatever impressions are made on the mind when it is plastic will remain there. Even a parrot can be taught the proper use of language. Repeat to a parrot, 2 and 2 make 4, and it will never say 2 and 2 makes 4. In writing, however, it is different. Without a knowledge of the fundamentals of grammar, we may be able to speak correctly from association with good speakers, but without such a knowledge we cannot hope to write the language correctly. To write even a common letter, we must know the principles of construction, the relationship of one word to another. Therefore, it is necessary for everybody to understand at least the essentials of the grammar of his own language. End of chapter 7.